provided by Sonoma Paint Center, located at 815 West Napa Street. For more information, you can go to sonomapaintcenter.com.
I would like to call to order this Monday, September 18th, 2017 regular meeting of the Sonoma City Council. Miss Ann Colachides, would you do me the great honor of leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, I would.
And all please rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Harrington. Here. Councilmember Agramonte. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Cook. Mayor Henley.
Here.
Thank you.
This time we have approval of the agenda. If anybody has any changes or a motion on that matter.
So moved. Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Harrington. Here. Councilmember Agramonte. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Henley.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 1 is comments from the public. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged by the mayor, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone. Begin by stating and spelling your name. Who's first?
Thomas Bernard, C-A-N-N-A-R-D, 706 5th Street East. 2 meetings past, I was by and spoke about the marijuana issue. And for you as a council to look at the negative side when you make decisions like this. Since then, I have spoken to the police chief. I have a grow next to me that I have to live with, I have to smell. Legally, I can do nothing about it, but it affects my life on a daily basis when I'm home. I would like to invite all 5 of you at 9:30 to my home in the morning, so you can have a fresh nose of what I have to live with on a daily basis. So you have an idea that some of the negative effects that happen in the neighborhood when this happens. A little disappointed when the police chief tells me I have no rights, I can do nothing about it. As typical, all these blatant laws get put into place and only concern themselves with the ones complaining about it, not the rest of the people that have to live around it. So I live at 706 5th Street East. Any of you that can make it at 9:30 tomorrow morning, I would much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Ann Colachitas, 14 Hacienda, Sonoma. So I wanted to announce that this week is a nationwide Renters Week of Action from September 18th through the 24th. And here in Sonoma, we're going to have a rally on Friday, September 22nd at 5:30 at the foot of Broadway. And we will have some guest speakers, including some members of the council, and also legal aid attorney for housing outreach and others from the Sonoma Valley Housing Group and North Bay Organizing Project. So I welcome everyone and invite them to come and tell their stories, because we know a lot of people, a lot of renters who have been having difficulties, and it's time to bring this all out in the open. Because we're fast becoming a nation of renters, and it's replacing the American dream of home ownership. So why is there a war on renters? Why the skyrocketing rents and brutal evictions, where renters are the ones who support the landlord class? Renters pay the mortgage and the taxes and the insurance and the utilities, and the property belonging to the landlord appreciates and is leveraged to buy more property, and that sort of seems like a really like a symbiotic relationship. But the exploitative and extractive practices that seek to take every last available dollar is embodied in the person of the first son-in-law, Jared Kushner, a notorious slumlord, if there ever was one, who was suing tenants evicted years ago now for back rent. He has them in court and ruining their lives. And he's, as well, at the same time, sucking at the teat of the federal government for subsidies, all the while his father-in-law, President, vows to defund HUD. But I digress. This evening, we were hoping to have more folks come here and tell some firsthand stories about their tenant struggles, but guess what? They're mostly gone, without a trace. Or they're working 2 or 3 jobs to pay their rent, or commuting 2 hours each way to get to their jobs because that's all they can afford. Or they're undocumented and they're smart to keep their heads down right now. Or they're worn out from trying to find a place that will take a HUD voucher. Or they're waiting for the sheriff to come. Or they're ashamed that it's a personal failure that they can't even qualify for the better apartment or house their family in the hottest real estate market in the country. Some have been here, right here at the podium before, but felt that it really didn't do any good. Well, we can't solve this problem here. Of course, it's nationwide, statewide, nationwide. We can begin to talk about it here and make some accounting for what our community has lost in the process and take steps to fix it. When all we ever wanted was a safe place where we can close the door, let down our guard, make some food, rest, and have a few laughs, live with peace and dignity. That's what the Renters Nation is mobilizing for now.
I'm going to do about 10 more seconds.
Is that too much to ask? I'm done. And next weekend on the 23rd and 24th, there will be a statewide renters convention in Alameda. And everyone who is interested in these topics are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dave Ransom, live in Santa Rosa, go to church in Sonoma. It's always a pleasure to address this council, and I recognize that some things are happening. First Street East came last meeting and said we give up on the hotel, and we'll see what happens with the other stuff. I want to say that there is some bad news, and it's a repetition of bad news that we've had now in this state for some time. California is #1, according to the U.S. Census, in poverty when housing is taken into effect. Number 17, if that's not the case. And when you think that 20% of the state is impoverished, according to the census, when their rent and mortgages are taken into case. Of course, in most people's case, it's the rent. And so since about 40% of the state rents, that's half of the renters who are living in poverty because of high housing costs. Is that the case here? We don't know specifically. But San Jose was the #1 most expensive place to live in the country, the highest level of poverty for renters in the country, and it's worth thinking about what the San Jose Council has done about that. In the last year, the San Jose Council, they have rent control in San Jose. They have lowered the percentage increase in rent from 8% to 5%, and then from 5% to 3%. And they have expanded their just cause eviction. They adopted just cause eviction for the first time. And the just cause eviction, of course, is when you can't just get thrown out so that the landlord can gussy the place up, and rent it at a higher rate. They passed that. The landlord started evicting everybody before it went into effect until the council came back and said, no, it starts tomorrow. And that's a gutsy council. This last week, the City Council of San Diego declared a public health state of emergency because of the hepatitis A epidemic amongst homeless, and have come up with the idea that they will house the homeless in military tents, the MASH tents that you may remember from the show, the big tents.
I'm going to give you 10 more seconds.
Oh, thank you. Anaheim has done the same thing. So yes, city councils can have an effect on this, and we look forward to more from y'all.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Fred Allenbach at 19550 8th Street East. That's ALLEBACH. I remembered from when I was a kid. I'm here with the Sonoma Valley Housing Group along with Ann and Dave, and I meet with them most Sundays at the Methodist Church. We talk about housing issues, and we're very concerned that the community will step up and pull for those things. And so I was wondering what I would say tonight, and I came to that a recent project nearly had an affordable housing project to be built on it at a south lot of the hospital, but that didn't pencil out because there wasn't enough units, there wasn't enough density. So apparently you need about 50 units to have a nonprofit affordable housing development, and after the Broadway Altamira project, I don't think it's likely that we'll see one of that scale in town. So I think that if we can't get that, then I would like to suggest that you raise the inclusionary requirement 35%, so that the affordable housing gets built at the scale that it's needed, and that you don't wait for 3 years for the general plan update, but to do an amendment on that now, so that projects will have built in the level of affordable housing that we need, and not just market rate housing that seems to be so popular. So I think that renters would just like to feel like they're seeing the city go to the mat as much as possible on this issue. And I know there's constraints of staff, money, and so the public doesn't always know how much you are going to the mat. And so maybe you can put on the city website exactly what you're doing, how many units are being built, what's up being built, and so the people can know. So if you're doing as much as you can, then that's great. But it's hard to tell just off the top of the head. So I would like to suggest that you do consider raising the inclusionary requirement to 35%, like some other municipalities have done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ken Brown, 1396 Lubeck Street in Sonoma. I'm with the Methodist Church Sunday morning meeting. We've invited all of you to attend our meetings, and we would love to be on the council agenda in the near future to talk about the issues facing renters in Sonoma. I encourage you to come Friday night to the plaza, 5:30, and we're going to have a rally, and it'll be a good experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beth Hadley, and I've lived in Sonoma Valley for over 30 years. I'm a retired teacher, and I'm the president of the Sonoma Valley Democrats, which is our local Democratic club. And the Sonoma Valley Democrats are supporters of the Renters Week of Action. We join with renters, low-income homeowners, people without homes, and all people who believe that housing is a human right. We oppose unfair rent increases and evictions, and we support strong community input on land and housing. And we recommend that the Sonoma City Council members consider these principles when you make future decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom Conlon, C-O-N-L-O-N, 18850 Robinson Road. I'm here just for myself tonight. I share some of the concerns raised by others tonight. My own kids are grown, but they're trying to find a way to live in the Bay Area, and the rent's too damn high. We've also had neighbors who have stinky flowers in their backyards and stinky other things going on in their backyard. It's a pain, but it also comes with the territory when you live in a neighborhood. And it's frankly, at my house, it's the smoke and the pesticide drift that bothers me more than my neighbor's flowers do. So I just hope you'll keep that in mind when you make your decisions. I'm really here just to thank you tonight. The reason I came tonight to speak in this 3 minutes is to thank you for your support of climate action in the county. I was able to attend the Community Service and Environment Commission this week. Your intern and staff are working diligently on following through on your commitments. And I'm pleased to say that Sonoma, from my perspective, Sonoma City of Sonoma is leading the county right now in your commitment to actually implement the climate action plan. It's actually stands out in sharp contrast to some statements recently that have come from the board of the Regional Climate Protection Authority in the wake of the successful legal case that found the county had failed to uphold the law in its CEQA analysis of our climate action plan. Anyone who actually takes a close look at the ruling will realize that the judge made a very reasonable decision, and hopefully the county will come to the wisdom that you all have already come to, that we need to move forward with implementing the plan. We should not be held up by the CEQA streamlining process that other communities seem to be stuck on. So I urge you to speak to your colleagues elsewhere in the county about this, demonstrate Sonoma's leadership. I'm doing everything I can in my role as a member of the RCPA Citizens Advisory Committee and the Citizens Advisory, I'm wearing a lot of hats. So that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment at this time? I see one more. Just made it.
I'm Georgia Kelly. I live at Mitchell Way in Sonoma. Actually, there are two things, but one, the most important, I think, and I've sent you all an email on it, and also sent a letter to the paper. Excuse me, I'm a little out of breath. I was running. I'm concerned about there being a recreational marijuana shop in town, which I oppose. And I oppose because I think we have enough drugs on the plaza with all the wine bars, and I don't think we need any more in our town or on the plaza. I think medical marijuana is fine. I agree with Cece Panasan, who said it probably should be sold by the hospital. And that makes sense, since if it's a medicine, that it be sold as a medicine. For recreational, I do think we have enough problems, and I'd like that to be outside the city limits if it's sold recreationally, because we are a small city. And if we start putting all this on the plaza or near the plaza, we're creating, well, I think we have to look at what are we creating? Who's going to be attracted to come to this city? Who will our visitors be? So I'm concerned about that. And as a renter, I'm just going to put it aside here since I have time, I'm concerned that rents go up, but salaries don't. And I think we're certainly facing that in our city, that the rents are going up, some more than others. But I think we have to look at this as a city and as our council to take some action about what are we going to allow, what percentages. I think it's worth looking at. So those are my 2 points until you get to the next issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comments at this time? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Do we have any meeting dedications today? Councilwoman Harrington.
Oh, I'd just like to dedicate the meeting in light of Renters Week to all of our renters here in Sonoma.
Thank you. All right, item 3.1, we have a proclamation declaring September 22nd through 28th, 2017 as Falls Prevention Awareness Week. Susan Idell Kornblatt, if you...
Kornblatt Idell.
Yes. Who will meet me at the podium. Thank you for being here. A City of Sonoma proclamation, Falls Prevention Awareness Week, September 22nd through 28th, 2017. Whereas falls are the leading cause of injuries requiring hospitalization or treatment and injury-related deaths in California, with the vast majority of these occurring among older individuals. And whereas falls are preventable when education, awareness, and interventions are put in place. And whereas the nationally ranked evidence-based A Matter of Balance program is sponsored by the Sonoma County Area Agency on Aging with partner agencies and trained volunteers to raise seniors' confidence about their balance and increase their activity levels to reduce risk of falls. And whereas since A Matter of Balance began in Sonoma County, approximately 1,250 older adults have participated in classes taught throughout the county. 137 sessions have been provided by 19 volunteer coaches, serving 154 seniors in fiscal year 2016 through 17. And whereas injuries from falls are a community health problem with many organizations, agencies, healthcare providers, and individuals working to raise awareness, to provide resources to prevent falls, and help those who suffer from complications from falls. And whereas the first day of fall, September 22nd, 2017, has been declared National Falls Prevention Awareness Day, and the 2017 theme is 10 years standing together to prevent falls. And whereas by legislative resolution of 2008, California has established the first week of fall as Falls Prevention Awareness Week. Now, therefore, I, Rachel Hundley, Mayor of the City of Sonoma, do hereby proclaim September 22nd through 28th, 2017 as Falls Prevention Awareness Week. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Just a couple of words would be great. Thanks for having me. I'm a volunteer with the Sonoma County Area Agency on Aging, also known as the AAA sometimes. And I'm here to receive the proclamation on behalf of the AAA. And I'm not sure that everybody realizes that among older adults, falls are the leading cause of injury-related deaths and the most common cause of non-fatal injuries and hospital admissions for trauma in the country. It's this estimated that $34 billion is incurred in the U.S. in direct healthcare costs as a result of falls. And recognizing the importance of the critical issue of falls and falls prevention, the state of California, as you just told us, has proclaimed this fall, September 22nd and 20th, Falls Prevention Awareness Week. And Sonoma County is one of the leaders in the state and also in the country in participating in this evidence-based program called A Matter of Balance that provides free and low-cost training to seniors to help increase physical strength, flexibility, and balance and help prevent falls. So if anybody's interested, just go online or call the Sonoma County Area Agency on Aging and say, I'd like to take a class in preventing falls for myself or a family member, and you'll be directed to, all run by volunteers, so bear with us as there are only limited number of volunteers that can teach classes, but we're all in this together, and thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.
Item 4 is our consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Are there any questions or any items to be pulled? Seeing none, I will take it out to the public.
I'd like to request to remove 4.3 from the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any other items from the public for the consent calendar? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for an action on some of our items. Mr. Cook.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve 4.1, 4.2, and 4.4.
Second.
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Agarmati? Aye. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Mayor Hunley?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, item 4.3, adopt a resolution approving a request from Risk Sonoma for funding in the amount of $1,500 to recover the cost of facility rental for their public presentation of The Other Side of Cannabis, a documentary film. And I will hand it over to our city manager.
So council, I believe you're aware of RISC, which is a local nonprofit that has provided information to parents on a variety of topics. They have done 2 public presentations in the recent past. Both have dealt with alcohol and drugs, and they desire to do a 3rd public presentation at the Sebastiani Theater on November 13th, and are asking for the council's assistance to help provide the funding in order to rent the theater. And as council is aware, the city does have a discretionary funding program, which is this year about $20,000 to handle types of requests that come through the year. And so there is funding available if council is interested in this. There was a letter attached from I'm going to get the correct name, sorry, from Leslie Nicholson, who's the director, making the request to council, and so that is the background on this item.
Do we have any questions from the council? Seeing none, I will take it out to the public for public comment on this item.
Thank you for your indulgence on this tonight. Again, Tom Conlon, C-O-N-L-O-N, 18850 Robinson Road. Speaking as an individual, but I am active in various nonprofits in town, and several of them have shown many films over the last 10 years. And most of them are documentaries. Occasionally, they do take a more advocacy type of perspective. I'm just curious. I've not noticed the council make a discretionary allocation. Maybe I've missed it for advocacy type films as part of its discretionary funding. And it occurs to me that that might be something that we would be interested in pursuing ourselves and some of the nonprofits I work with in town. And so it just struck me as odd to have the council be responding to that. Maybe there's more background that I'm not aware of. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
George Kelly again. I just want to comment on that because as I'm a director of a nonprofit, I've never thought of coming to the city council to pay for our films or to pay for a program. And I do think it might be setting a precedent for other nonprofits to look to the council for funding for when they want to put on a program, especially an advocacy program. I think could get the council in somewhat of trouble. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Leslie Nicholson. I live at 18552 Happy Lane, and I'm the director of Risk Sonoma. And we are, as it was mentioned, working on bringing presentations to the community. And we are a newer nonprofit, and the opportunity presented itself for us to put together a letter and ask for the discretionary funds. The documentary, The Other Side of Cannabis, is going to be on November 12th. I've spoken to Roger Roten in the afternoon. It's a Sunday afternoon. And we are going to have a panel discussion. We're inviting all sides to come. And in addition to our request, the Sonoma Valley Health Center, Community Health Center, has generously offered to sponsor the speaker and cover her fees as well. She is the producer of the documentary, Jody Belcher. She lives in San Luis Obispo. We are concerned as a nonprofit that's newer in the community. We're concerned about supporting parents and educating. And we feel that there have been efforts in the past. I won't put that aside, but we have really been focused on in the last 4 years and bringing things more to the forefront. As a parent in the community raising teenagers, it's very difficult with drug culture in the community, and we feel that education is a really important part of helping parents get through these teenage years. There's a lot of issues behind it. And I appreciate consideration of our letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the council for discussion and possible action.
Thank you so much. From what I understand, and I have been present at the presentations, and each presentation gives both sides. It's not a support group. It's not supporting anything other than parents needing information regarding different issues, opioids, alcohol, and now, of course, cannabis. And so I have always seen people coming from both sides of the issue here at these presentations, and I think it's healthy, especially now that we're dealing with these issues here in Sonoma. And I just am pleased to help Risk do the things that they're trying to do, and all that is informing parents, families, children, and here in Sonoma. And as I said, they don't just present one side. In fact, I believe we are going to have a dispensary, a person from a dispensary from Santa Rosa at this meeting, so that obviously is presenting another side of this issue. And I just appreciate we finally are getting this out in the open. Thank you.
Ms. Harrington.
Oh, my only comment is I don't think that this is a precedent-setting event. I think that for many, many years, there's been a discussion of cannabis. It looks like both because of the law and the council, that times have changed with regard to its accessibility in Sonoma. And there are a lot of concerned parents. And so in light of that, I don't think it's something we would do on a regular basis, but I think it's very relevant, and I'm happy to support it on this one occasion.
I'm going to support it as well. I think it's a great use of our discretionary funds, and I look forward to attending it.
Mr. Cook?
And I also will be supporting this. I think with the local legislation that's been passed in the last year, and that's coming to the forefront, especially with City of Sonoma, and I don't think it sets a precedence either.
And while I will also be supporting it, I do understand the question raised. And in the past, we've given our discretionary fund so we helped start the creation of a documentary. We've underwrote parts of some events. So there's been a wide array of things. And I'm supporting it mainly because I think that RISC is doing some important work in our community, and it's just very timely at our last meeting. Some of you know we had our cannabis workshop, and it looks like we might be moving forward on something in that arena, and I think it's important for the entire community to have a wide conversation about it, even if it means considering opinions that we don't really agree with. Mr. Cook?
So I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve item 4.3 on the consent calendar.
And I'll make a second.
Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Mayor Hundley?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, item 6.1, receive presentations and provide feedback on public transportation in Sonoma, including a presentation from Sonoma County Transit and funding request for Napa Valley Transit Authority's Vine Route 25. And I will start with our city manager.
Great, I will open. Very pleased tonight to really have a few conversations about public transit. I had the opportunity to meet Brian Albee, who's standing before you now, the Executive Director of Sonoma County Transit, probably about 2 months ago, and he gave me part of the presentation you'll see, and I just felt like it was very timely and interesting. So part of the pieces that Brian's going to go through is just an overview of transit, really talking about some of the things they're doing with SMART and then paratransit. Once Brian's completed, we will then also move on and have a conversation with Kate Miller, the Executive Director of the Napa Valley Transit Authority. There is one route that Napa Valley has currently from Napa to the plaza. And so once Brian's done, we'll introduce Kate and have her make a brief presentation, and then I'll provide some additional context as well. Thank you, Brian. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Hundley, members of the council. Brian Albee with Sonoma County Transit. I'm very happy to be here tonight and tell a little bit about what we do at Sonoma County Transit. We have been operating since July of 1980, and the routes in Sonoma and Sonoma Valley are one of our first routes that started in the fall of 1980. But before we get to that, a little bit about kind of our operating day. We start very early from 5:30 in the morning till about 10:30 at night. We have 42 buses, Sonoma County Transit buses out on the street in the afternoon. About 2:15 is when our peak is. Our maintenance shop operates around the clock. We use natural gas to power our fleet. We use about 2,350 therms a day, and the fleet consists of 44 heavy-duty coaches, both 30 and 40-foot lengths, and 6 minibuses for a 50-bus fleet total. Annual ridership is about 1.1 million passenger trips. We provide two types of services: local routes, which include here in Sonoma and Sonoma Valley, Rohnert Park and Cotati, out in the river communities of Guerneville and Monterey, Windsor, Sebastopol, Healdsburg, and Cloverdale. The two cities we don't provide local services to are Petaluma and Santa Rosa, which have their own respective transit systems. Back when Sonoma County Transit started in 1980, the primary purpose of the system was to connect the county's then 8, now 9 incorporated cities with downtown Santa Rosa for connections to Golden Gate Transit and Santa Rosa Transit, and also to downtown Petaluma for connections to Petaluma Transit, and now for connections to SMART. We operate a coast route during the summer from Santa Rosa out to the coast, and we subsidize Mendocino Transit Authority to come up from the Mendocino coast to serve our coast, come into Sebastopol and into Santa Rosa. That service serves our coast residents. It's a trip that comes in the morning and returns to the coast in the evening. With the advent of the Americans with Disabilities Act in the early 90s, a lot of our efforts and resources shifted to paratransit. And this is one area of growth, particularly for the county system. Each year over the last 4 years, we've had about a 43% increase in paratransit trips. And what this is service, ADA complimentary paratransit service operates the same hours and days as the Sonoma County Transit fixed route service. So wherever you see a Sonoma County Transit route operating, we also have the ADA paratransit services as well. We provide the service with a mix of vehicles for minivans, sedans, and accessible minibuses, and trips can be scheduled up to a week in advance or for the next day. We have a requirement that we provide next day service, so for all eligible trip requests we get, we have to provide those trips as soon as the next day. Approximately 58,000 passenger trips are made each year, and about 9% of those trips are here in the Sonoma and Sonoma Valley area. The paratransit fleet consists of 32 vehicles. We have two unique programs that the Board of Supervisors approved back in 2015, and that is our Veterans Subsidized Fare Program and the Veterans Ride Sonoma County Transit Free with no trip restrictions. This has been a very popular program. The first year in 2015, it was a pilot program. The board made it permanent in December of 16. So it is a permanent program. The other component of the subsidized fare program is college students. This also started in 2015. We're now into our third year. The board has extended this annually each December, and we'll go back to the board this December for that discussion for 2018. Some things have changed, and that is the Santa Rosa Junior College and also Sonoma State University have undertaken efforts to raise money from their student body, particularly the JC, to help support this program. And that will be, hopefully we will be able to establish a multi-year agreement with the colleges and with the board this December to continue on into 2018 and beyond. One unique item about Sonoma County Transit is that we have a all-natural gas-powered fleet. This goes back to 1996, and since 2006, all the 30 and 40-foot coaches are powered by natural gas, and over the years that has saved us a fair amount of money. With the low cost of natural gas, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, that has saved us about $1.2 million annually. We have several routes that serve the valley, and I mentioned one of our early routes, Route 30, which is the kind of the main route in the valley. It is the intercity route that serves Sonoma, Sonoma Valley, Oakmont, Glen Ellen, Kenwood, Oakmont, into downtown Santa Rosa. The end of the route is actually the county center adjacent to the Kaiser Medical Center. The Route 30 operates 7 days a week. The other route is Route 32, which used to be Sonoma Caravan. It used to be a volunteer community-based route that we took over at their request back in 1991. Route 32 operates 6 days a week and provides local service within the city, also serves Temmelec and the Sonoma Valley communities. Route 38 is a route that Golden Gate Transit provided for a number of years under Route 90. This, I think we started operating this back in 2003. And there is a morning trip that goes south to the Santa Fe Transit Center to connect with Golden Gate to go into the city. And there's a return trip in the evening. Intercity Route 40, again, one of the early routes, primarily routes from Sonoma, provides weekday service for connections from Sonoma over to Petaluma for their downtown transit mall, which is also adjacent to the SMART station. And back in July, in anticipation of SMART, that, as you know, started last month, we introduced Route 53. Route 53 is essentially Route 40 with time trips that connect with SMART, trips south in the morning and return trips from the north in the evening. Real quickly, this is a map, kind of half of the 30 and 34 on the left, starting in Santa Rosa, on the right, Sonoma. You can see it. We have a lot of stops. Collectively, the transit system has about 1,100 stops throughout the county. Route 30, like I mentioned, provides service 7 days a week. It serves the city and the valley area. And Route 34 is a abbreviated version of that does not serve Oakmont and has some other areas that it omits. Essentially, the Route 34 is the deadhead for the local buses that come out here and do the Route 32. This is a shot of the weekday schedule on Route 30. These are the eastbound trips and the westbound trips. Route 32 is your local service that operates Monday through Saturday, and you can see the map and an extensive coverage area from Temmelec to the city and the valley. Route 38 is the commute bus I mentioned that serves Sonoma to the San Rafael Transit Center, and actually that bus goes into service on its way from Santa Rosa in Kenwood and continues through Sonoma over to the San Rafael Transit Center to the south. One trip in the morning and one trip returns in the evening. And the Route 40 is the bus that goes from Sonoma to the Petaluma Transit Mall, adjacent to SMART. And you can see we have the Route 53, which is the new route, intermixed in here, and you can see how it coordinates with SMART to make a trip. For the primary trip is the southbound commute in the morning, the northbound commute in the evening, but you can also commute northbound and get over to the valley as well and return in the evening. A little bit about who rides Sonoma County Transit. Here we portrayed Route 30, the intercity bus that goes from Sonoma to Santa Rosa, the Route 40, which is the bus over to Petaluma, and Route 32 being your local service. The first column there is the system averages for all the routes in the Sonoma County Transit system. And you can see that Route 30 is right on par for adult ridership. Route 40 is a little higher with adults, and Route 32 is a little less. The local service system-wide is 12%. It's higher actually on all three of your routes here. Youth are 18 and under, which in all categories is a little bit less than we see system-wide. Disabled, Route 30 is very close to the system average, as well as 32. And transfers kind of on par with the rest of the system, but where maybe a difference here in the valley is Route 32. We have 6%, a fair amount of free rides, and these are children with parents or a guardian under 5 and under. The Clipper card is something that we have been working on here in the Bay Area for nearly 20 years. Last January, it finally came to Sonoma County. This is a regional transit pass electronic card that you swipe on and swipe off when you board a transit vehicle, and we introduced that last January along with Santa Rosa City Bus and Petaluma Transit. The primary reason is to join the rest of our colleague transit systems in the Bay Area, but also to provide a fare mechanism, transfer mechanism to SMART, as the Clipper card is the primary fare media for SMART. We also introduced last year our real-time transit information system called NextBus. And if you take the NextBus app and open it up here in the valley, it will show the nearest Sonoma County Transit bus stop to where you're at and the minutes that the nearest bus will be to you. If you click on a route, this is a Windsor example, you click on a route, it will show you the route, the bus stops, and where the bus is en route. with that, we're also introducing new transit shelters throughout the Bay Area. A lot of our shelters date back to the 80s and are in need of being replaced. This is an example of one of the new styles. When we install these, if we can get power, we'll put the Next Bus sign up, which is shown in the upper right-hand corner there, to indicate when buses are going to serve the shelter. And then also we have lights and USB charging ports on these shelters as well. We have received quite a few buses in the last few years, and earlier this year we received some more. Two of the newer ones are here in the valley. The bus shown in the lower right is a 30-foot bus. There are two that operate in the valley. These are very well equipped buses, and they complement the larger buses, which are the same model, just 10 feet longer. In the valley, we have, at times, we'll have the two local buses. We may have 3 intercity buses here, as well as 4 paratransit vehicles. So you don't have to go too far to see one of our buses serving your community. I mentioned the new buses. They do have a lot of features: onboard Wi-Fi, reclining seats, reading lamps, automated stop announcements, and USB charging ports, and video security systems. Back in July, when we introduced the new smart routes, we also introduced a new revamped web page. And this is just the front page of it. Some of the features are you can plan your trip from the front page. Also provides links to where you can download the NextBus app. And one of the big improvements we made is improving the way you can buy your transit passes online. And this we've got good reviews from the public on, and certainly upgraded the shopping experience for transit passes. And also this complements the Clipper Regional Transit Pass program as well. With the new web page, we introduced pages for each city that we serve. And we've got the Sonoma page done now. And you can see, you click on Sonoma, you can see the local service, which referenced there is 32, the intercity services, and then also the smart connector services. So we will be working with the cities to hopefully be able to link these pages, their respective pages, to their web pages in terms of the services that Sonoma County Transit provides in their community. So with that, the future, we're looking probably next summer to take a critical look at the local route. It's been a long time since we've made any changes. We want to look at that to see if there's places we can serve better than we do today. We also have rebranded our local routes in other places in the county as shuttles. And so if we follow that practice here, the local route will really change from Route 32 to the Sonoma shuttle. And hopefully that will give it a closer connection with the Sonoma community. We have the Cloverdale shuttle, the Windsor shuttle, and the Sebastopol shuttle today. So we will be doing that. Also, I mentioned the bus stop shelters. We'll start working with your staff to identify areas in the city and the valley where we can replace some of the old shelters with new ones, and also where we can expand our bus amenities program, which is more benches and those type of items of the shelters. So with that, if there's any questions.
Do we have any questions, Ms. Harrington?
Oh, I have 2 questions. One, what is the source of funding for Sonoma County Transit? Just curious.
The source of funding, the primary source of funding is State Transportation Development Act funds, which is a 1/4 cent of state sales tax that returns to the county on a per capita basis. And so it's supporting approximately 17% of the costs in the valley for the services is the city's TDA funds that come to Sonoma County Transit. They're programmed each April, May through the Sonoma County Transportation Authority. In terms of that amount, it represents about 3% of the total cost of Sonoma County Transit operations and about 3% of the paratransit operation as well.
Thank you. My second question was just for the SMART train, are you anticipating adding additional times in the morning, or do you think from Sonoma to Petaluma, or any thought you see how it goes, or?
Well, we're very early into it. SMART is closely monitoring their ridership. We are working with them to get a sense through surveys that they're taking, surveys that we'll take later on this fall in terms of, we laid out some initial service. Was that right? Are we connecting to the right trips? Or are we connecting too early, or are we connecting too late? As you know, their SMART's schedule changed a few times before they start service, and so we're connecting to them primarily. They're not connecting to us. So we are working with them and following what they're doing, and hopefully we'll get some more passenger input. But it's been very early. I think this is week 4, and new routes are getting some use. They're not getting a lot of use in all areas, but we are optimistic that they will grow.
Great. I'll be curious to see how that develops. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Cook?
I just have a question about federal grants and funding that come directly to Sonoma County Transit. Is there a percentage, or do you even know the amount?
We get a little over $1 million a year in federal funds that come to support our maintenance program. And then we receive about $700,000 a year for capital purposes. And those are usually accumulated for bus replacement projects. That is on the Sonoma County Transit side, and then on paratransit, we receive about generally $500,000 a year in federal rural funds that fund the replacement of the paratransit vehicle. They have a much shorter life. They turn over much quicker than the larger buses do.
And are you assuming that you're going to continue getting that federal funding and the federal grants?
Well, there's some uncertainty with the federal program, and we don't know. So far, we haven't seen any cuts, but we don't really know going forward. We would like to see more, but there's also a chance we could see less.
Thank
you. Ms. Agramonte?
Yeah, thank you. On page are we? Where it discusses the $33,000. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong agency. Pardon.
I think we're going to get to there. Any questions? Thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you.
So next up.
So next up, I'd like to invite Kate Miller up to the podium. Kate is Executive Director of Napa Valley Transit Authority, and as council is aware, and I'll let Kate kind of tell some of the history, but we do have Route 25 that comes in, makes 7 stops daily in Sonoma, and there's on weekdays and no service on weekends. And there has been some funding changes, and so the Napa Valley Transit Authority is looking at continuing the route between Napa and Sonoma, and based on some reductions in funding. And so they reached out to both staff and to some council members, had some conversations about marketing, funding. There's conversations that have occurred with Brian, Mr. Alby's organization, and also Sonoma County Transportation Authority, looking for some other opportunities. So let me have Kate briefly describe a little bit about the route and where they are as an agency, and then I'll be happy to provide my recommendation and then take any council questions.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. So it's Napa Valley Transportation Authority. We're an agency that has the distinction of both managing the transit system as well as doing the highway and road programming and planning. So we have our hands full in Napa, and I appreciate you having me here this evening. We do have a route that connects Sonoma with the city of Napa, and we implemented that route about 4 years ago, and it has not been a very effective route. We had hoped to have more interest, but I think the challenge is that we have 2 very similar communities where we have very similar workforces and very similar housing costs, and I think most of our workers come from outside of the area, so we didn't have that nexus that oftentimes supports the healthy type transit systems that we have. So that, I think, is a challenge. We implemented the service because we had the opportunity to seek 5311 funds. They're 5311F funds. It's a competitive grant program that's managed by Caltrans. They're Federal Transit Administration funds that Caltrans manages. And the funding for the statewide funding for 5311F funds are going down because as more urbanized areas are developed, the total amount of funding for the state goes down. I know that's kind of confusing. Probably Brian is the only one in the room that he's even following the funding thing. But as a consequence to that, we did get our funding cut, and it sort of prompted us to take a look at how effective the two services we were funding with those funds. And the route to Solano County is much more productive. And so after giving some thought, staff in May recommended to our board to cut the Route 25 service. We did get a lot of comments, and in the course of those comments, we found out that a lot of the riders are actually from Sonoma. A majority of them are from Sonoma, and many of them are actually riding the midday service, and we really got the feeling that it wasn't maybe commuters that were primarily using the system. And so then we saw funding from both the Sonoma TID as well as the Visit Napa Valley to see if there was a nexus of building this as some sort of, tourist sort of service where we could expand it into the evening hour just to see if the ridership would change. But there was not the eligibility for those fund sources. So we did not, we weren't successful in trying to figure that one out. So staff is now going to go back on Wednesday to the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Board and recommend again that the service be cut. I don't know what their decision is going to be, but based on its performance, it's really hard to justify continuing to spend the critical, rare financial resources on this service. We are working with the other 3 North Bay counties as part of the State Route 37 discussions to see what we can do about improving the east-west connection in the North Bay. Geographically, it's a challenge because until I moved up here, I had no idea that it took an hour to get from Napa to San Rafael. I thought I could go have lunch with friends, but it's really far apart. And it's really hard to serve as a consequence to that, and the fact that there is not a whole lot of population density between some of the cities. So that said, we still are working on figuring out how we can't relieve congestion in the North Bay counties and use transit as an alternative means. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this time? Ms. Agramonte?
Well, then I'll go back to my question that I almost gave to the wrong agency. With respect to the, staff from the city, Sonoma County Transit Authority, Sonoma County Transportation Authority, and Napa Valley Transit Agency have discussed the route and options. In order to continue the route, $33,333 more per year would be needed. With limited transit funding available, Sonoma County Transit is focusing efforts to improve intra-Sonoma Valley routes and to connect Sonoma Valley to SMART, and no funding is available for this Napa-Sonoma connection. So what is the $33,000?
Well, off the top of my head, I can't remember. I think it might have been the reduction in the funding that Caltrans might have been proposing, but even regardless of that, that was sort of the thing that opened up our eyes to maybe evaluating the service and how productive it is. And I think the proposal to cut the service would have occurred anyway. The route to Solano County is, on the other hand, becoming more and more productive, and those two interregional routes are the 2 routes that are actually eligible for the funding. And for us, it just makes more sense for staff. And again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. This is, again, our staff recommendation to the board. I don't know how the board is going to respond, but it just makes more sense to me to fund a service that's actually productive and that has a potential for a lot more ridership growth, and that we can actually maybe increase the service to capture some of the workers that we know are coming from Solano County into Napa County. And it's unfortunate because you have the same labor force, a lot of the same labor force. There's that disconnect. There isn't the connectivity, but we're not seeing people in general connecting from the services from Solano County to the Route 25 to get to Sonoma. So it's not like that service would provide a good way for a lot of people to get to work. So it would be a long route, a long ride.
Mr. Edwards?
So, I'm sorry. I guess my only comment, and I'm on the Transportation Authority in Sonoma, and something that I bring quite often, and my predecessor did, and our supervisor did, is we continue to be at the end of the pipe for services here because our size and proximity, and I think even some issue we're going to be discussing later on this evening mentions that we're sort of out of the way. So we really, it's unfortunate that we end up in this position, time and time again. So what's the alternative then for people going between Napa? I know I've had a person that said, I get my car fixed in Napa, I bring it over there, wait, walk around town, have lunch, and come back. So possibly that's one of those persons you're saying during the middle of the day, or even tourists. So it's unfortunate, we're beautiful, we're everything, but we really lack in some of those services. So I personally am very disappointed, and it continues to be the same old story here for Sonoma. Thanks.
Mr. Edwards, and we are just on questions right now. We're going to go out to public comment, and then we get to talk. You want to wait till then? Yeah, that's fine. All right, any more questions? Got a quick question.
Do you have any numbers about the ridership?
Yes, I do. There is a table showing the total ridership in your packet that Kathy borrowed from our agenda item, and those are the annual numbers, but the daily numbers are about 40 trips per day, which is very, very low. We have passengers per revenue hour is 4.8, and our standard, our system-wide standard is 9.5. Most of our routes carry around 14 to 15 riders per hour, so it'll give you a feeling for where we are. Another area where the route is underperforming is fare box recovery. You probably don't get to hear about this, but we actually have a statutory requirement to meet 15% fare box recovery, and the route 25 has a 3.4% fare box recovery. So it's another challenging area, and so it takes the system average down.
Okay, got another question.
Do you have a question? I'm sorry.
I think I know the answer, but what is the annual cost of the service? What is that?
I want to say it's $240,000 to operate the system, to operate the route. Yeah, $239,869. Sorry, I rounded up.
That's what I remembered. Yeah. Thank you.
And how many seats are in the, I know they're smaller. I think I've seen these buses. Is that the white? Are they the white?
Well, we do some interlining, but most of the time you're going to get what we call cutaways over here. So they're vehicles that are very similar to the paratransit vehicles, but with more seats in them.
And how many is that?
I think that they seat around 25 people, something like that.
So are you saying that we have 14? Did you say a number of 14 that ride?
40 a day.
Oh, okay.
So in any given trip, there's maybe 4 or 5 passengers, sometimes 1 or 2.
I'm sorry, I only see them on the plaza. Do they go through Sonoma? I have no idea.
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I believe we're going to
Go out to public comment and then come back to me, and then we'll hear from council.
All right, this time I'm going to open floor for public comment on this item. Seeing none, wait, I see one. Mr.
Sorry,
Conlon.
just quickly, Tom Collin again. Just pointing out that this agenda item said compliance with Climate Action 20 goals not applicable, and that's actually just an oversight. There's actually 7 measures in Goal 5, encourage a shift toward low carbon transportation options, that are all mentioned transit, and then in the local measures, increased transit accessibility, Measure 4L2, and affordable housing linked transit 4L4. I just think it's important to anchor this discussion in the Climate Action Plan. I'm as depressed as anybody is about the low ridership on this route. I'm not sure that we've done everything we can to increase ridership on a route like this. But since no one else rose to speak, I figured I should do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back and hand it over to our city manager.
So just briefly want to lay out kind of staff's recommendation on this. I mean, I think we all would love to have a route that was robust and really working well. Unfortunately, that's not the situation, and the route's been around for a number of years. In terms of a request for the city to put general fund dollars in, that really would be our only source of funding. And while I believe transit is important, I don't believe it's our core responsibility, and there are a variety of other kind of city priorities that we, if we had excess general fund reserves, we should be using for. So, you know, I think these are broad systems. I appreciate the work that both the executive directors are doing with the resources they have. Unfortunately, you know, transit is not as well funded as we would all like, and we're facing a hard choice here. But I wish the answer was different, but staff's recommendation at this point would be that the city not use general fund reserves to fund this route. Thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
So I first got involved with this by meeting with Gene Tickle over in Napa, the mayor of Napa, and another council member. And we were at an event in downtown with the new construction that's going on down there. And they said, gee, we only need $33,000 to keep this thing alive. And I said, well, $33,000, that would be easy, even if we had to raise it privately. But then we got together, we had a meeting here in the council chambers, and the numbers don't really add up. You know, it's $250,000, and it's very low ridership. And but I see in the future, thinking about what Mr. Collins is saying, in Napa right now, there's going to be train service, not probably in our lifetimes, but the rail service is going to go all the way from where the wine train is going now, all the way into Vallejo, and it'll connect with the ferry at some point. I know there's discussions and there's private investment that's working on that. Madeline, you've talked about, you know, let's get the SMART train over here. It's not going to happen. Yeah. But I see at some point with the SMART train going on, we've got to create that connection, and there's not enough incentive for people to just get on the bus. It takes a while, but I think as we get crunched more and more with traffic, et cetera, and, you know, the feds aren't doing anything about Highway 37 and all the other issues that are going on, and people are finding ways to cut through Sonoma and find the path of least resistance. But I think that we need to keep this in mind for the future, and maybe future councils, that, you know, we're going to end up needing public transportation both ways. I think when Napa really gets built out, as they are doing downtown, and I think you're going to see some draw from employees in Sonoma to Napa, because it's pretty dynamic there right now. And I think as these properties open up, I think you're going to see some draw from here. And there might be some potential that where there's some bus ridership that would be needed. But in the meantime, for $250,000, that's a lot of creative, you know, maybe some private transportation that could happen, like happens in other countries. So as much as I thought it would be fun to bring this along and see if we could get something going, I do agree with staff that and with Kate that it's probably time that we look to the future for this. So, thank you.
Mr. Cook.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Napa Valley Transit Agency, Kate, for coming over and talking to us, and also Vice Mayor Edwards for bringing this, you know, to our attention. Because at first, when anybody heard that there was a transit being taken away from Napa to Sonoma, it's something that when you're stuck in gridlock, you go, why are they doing that? You know, this discussion just proves the fact that our traffic is not caused by the people coming from Napa and to Sonoma. It's 37. I always try to get on the soapbox whenever I have a chance, because we really need to talk to our federal legislatures and our state about Highway 37. What's happening if you drive it, it goes from a 2-lane road to a 1-lane road. and people traveling from Marin County to Solano County and Napa County, it's a disaster. And what it's doing to our little island, that we always call this our little island, because constituents always ask me, where are these people going? These people are going home, and they're going to work, and they're bypassing the whole mess that happens on 37. So I do agree with Vice Mayor Edwards that this is something that maybe we could look at in the future as gridlock gets worse, but hopefully we can fix our problem. Whenever we talk about transit, I'm always shocked because of the ferry systems that we have. I don't believe Napa has a ferry system. Sonoma doesn't have one. I wish that we had one out by 37. I think that would get us where we're not caught up in the Vallejo traffic down 37. But these are all things that I think we need to be talking to our state legislatures. I know when I run for city council, when I ran for re-election, everybody was talking about traffic. And it was really sad to say from the dais that we have really nothing that we can really do. Tonight we have a decision that possibly we could spend $33,000 that Napa probably won't be ending up anymore to $250,000 for very few ridership. So I always just say that so the headline in the IT isn't that we don't care about transportation, because we do. We want 37 fixed. Well, I know, not speaking for my colleagues, but we want 37 fixed. We want it fixed now because it's causing Sonoma some major problems. And I don't think people realize those people on 121 are not going to Petaluma. They're going to San Francisco. I'm shocked when I went to Napa the other day to a store, and I came back. It took me 45 minutes, and it was not an accident. And I called my wife and I said, here's the deal. We're never going to Napa again. And I guess I'm not going to Petaluma, and I'm not going to San Francisco either, I guess, if you base it on that. So I just want to thank you for coming, but I will not be supporting that, and those are my reasons why. Thanks.
I've also had that thought about never leaving Sonoma. It's just too hard to get back. I'm sad to have to support, cutting the route, but I just think it's not utilized enough, and it doesn't seem justified. And I have seen basically empty buses on a number of occasions, maybe one person, and I don't, it just doesn't make any sense as far as I can tell. I would hope that we could consider it more of like a suspension of the route with reconsideration later if that becomes appropriate. But I also don't support expending the funds.
Final words? So at this point, and I also agree that the money, it sounds like, could be better invested elsewhere. And for Sonoma County, I'm very excited about lots of things that you talked about, including looking at our local routes next year. So do we need to take an official action if the answer is no, or do we just let it die?
No, you do not need to take official action. I think if you wanted to fund it, I would need an affirmative action. But at this point, if there, I hear feedback. I'm not sure I heard Madeline. Did Madeline speak her final? I wasn't sure.
As Amy said, it's very sad because it continues to be an issue here in Sonoma. While we're probably the most beautiful city in the world, we still have some things that we need. And it's unfortunate that our battle is proximity and population. Thank you.
All right. So there, Mr. Edwards?
But I'd be wide open to the first autonomous bus going between downtown Napa and Sonoma, for the record.
Probably one day. So there is no action at this time. We will move on to item 6.2. Thank you both for coming. Study session on wine tasting rooms and related businesses in the downtown area. And we will begin with our city manager.
Great. Thank you, thank you, Mayor Hunley, and council members, members of the community that are here present and those watching. A little bit of context of how we got here. Our council had a retreat in May, and part of the conversation was a conversation about community character, and there was a desire to really look at tasting rooms, and so the direction of council was do some research and come back in the fall, and let's have a study session on tasting rooms. And so that is why we're here tonight. The overall purpose of this is really a broad kind of context and education for all of us as we think about tasting rooms. First, we want to provide an overview of kind of the state of tasting rooms in Sonoma. As council knows, and some members of the community may know, the council last looked at this in 2014, made some adjustments, and so we'll remind you what those were. It's also, I think, important for us to have some context of understanding what's happening in the wine industry in terms of how that is influencing tasting rooms and just changing the way the industry is reaching in their business. We've got a little bit of information on sales tax and revenue, and I think there's some more research that we want to do there. If council wants to have further conversations. We've also gone out, and I want to thank both David Goodison and Patricia Schultz for doing research about some of the other communities and how they have approached regulating tasting rooms. I also, we had some outreach and met with not only folks from a number of tasting rooms to kind of have a first conversation about 3 weeks ago. Also met with Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers, again, as kind of coming together so we could understand their perspective, concerns, and issues as well, and have tried to reflect those in the staff report. The other piece is really to make sure that council understands what are some policy options that you have ahead of you. So I think we can call this a study session, we can call this an education session, we can call it a community conversation. And that's really how we've tried to frame it for you. So the way we're going to kind of roll this out tonight is once I finish here briefly, our planning director, David Goodison, we've got about 20 slides to kind of go through with you. Patricia will do one of those slides as well, and then I'll wrap up and talk about options and next steps. We have invited Maureen Cottingham, Executive Director, Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers, to come speak, also just kind of representing tasting rooms as a whole and the wine industry in our valley to speak, and so she will come forward and speak from the podium as well. We'll then have a chance for council questions and then public comment, and then we'll be asking council members for your individual initial comments and if there's any requests for any additional information. So I think it's looking forward to hearing from folks and to this conversation. So with that, I will turn it to David Goodison.
Thank you. All right, well, at least for purposes of Sonoma, in the beginning, there was the plaza. The plaza dates back to the town's founding as a Mexican pueblo in 1835. At that time, the plaza and the gridiron street system were mapped out under the direction of General Vallejo. Key structures or landmarks today soon followed, including the mission and the barracks. After those initial uses and structures were established, commercial structures followed, such as the Blue Wing Inn, which opened for business in 1848. At the same time, the local wine industry was already becoming established with the 14-acre vineyard associated with the mission. The permanent civic buildings that we know today came later with the construction of City Hall in 1909 and the Carnegie Library in 1912. And in this era, Sonoma and Sonoma Valley attracted many tourists, resulting in the construction of a number of hotels and restaurants. Sonoma has been somewhat insulated from change due to its geography, and just different circumstances that you've alluded to in the previous discussion. These include a relatively small population and our distance from the Highway 101 corridor. But eventually larger economic trends have had their effect. For example, Sonoma's downtown began to follow national trends by transitioning away from serving as the main street, in which the basic retail and service needs of its residents were provided for right around the plaza, as those uses migrated to shopping centers. At that time, here we're talking about the 50s, 60s, and 70s, Sonoma was populated with hardware stores, an office supply store, a butcher shop, a pharmacy, a grocery store. But by the early 1980s, those uses had migrated to other locations or had closed their business. And right now, the skating rink is on the window, is on the slide, just because I like the history of this building. I think it's very interesting, and I think it's also emblematic of some of these changes. What we're looking at is the Sebastiani Rollatorium, which was constructed in 1945. after the roller skating interest died, other uses followed, and it eventually transitioned into something called Food City, which was a relatively large grocery store by the standards of the day. And it too is no more, because by the 1980s, when Food City closed, there were just other better options in town, including especially with the opening of the Sonoma Marketplace Shopping Center off of 2nd Street West. So today, what we have in that building is the Mercado. It's been basically remodeled and subdivided into 10 spaces that now are populated primarily by specialty retail and certain kinds of services. One of the issues that, one of the larger issues we want to bring to people's attention as part of this discussion just has to do with how Sonoma can be affected by some of these larger trends, including the recent recession. This slide, which was developed by the Sonoma County Economic Development Board, illustrates the effect of the 2007 recession on retail employment. It was like jumping off a cliff. It was a pretty bad time for retail in Sonoma as well as the country as a whole. And it's taken many years for retail employment in Sonoma County to come back from that, from those losses. And we can also think back to how that affected businesses in the plaza. There were any number of vacant tenant spaces at that time, especially on West Napa Street, west of the plaza, on Broadway, and in a number of the interior commercial locations. So thankfully, we're well into a recovery in that regard. But it's just important to remember that the economy is cyclical, and when a recession hits, property owners are kind of taking what they can get in terms of commercial tenants. There's a number of other factors that have shaped the downtown. We've already talked about how the Main Street era shifted in the 1970s with the transition to shopping center-based retail. More locally, Sonoma also went through a period of time in the 1990s and early 2000s in which a number of unreinforced masonry buildings around the square were upgraded to meet seismic safety requirements mandated by the state. In some cases, those upgrades were performed without a lot of disruption, but in other buildings, it was much more extensive remodelings were required, and they were sometimes closed for extended period of times, resulting in tenant turnover. Sonoma, like the rest of the country, has experienced changes as a result of the rise of the internet and online shopping and services. And what we have seen locally is that as local serving retailers and services transition out of the downtown, newer businesses are more reliant on tourism or specialty shopping. Now, at the same time, we're very fortunate in that Sonoma's history of historic structures is unique. It differentiates the downtown from other commercial settings, and we have a very, well, I think we just have a terrific downtown. We're very fortunate with the strength and diversity of our downtown and just the vitality of it. That said, we've got a economy, not just locally, but throughout the Bay Area, that has resulted in commercial rents rising, and we're certainly experiencing that here, and that does have its share of consequences. We're talking about wine tasting today, but this isn't the first time that different use restrictions have been discussed with respect to different categories of business on the plaza. For example, in 2005, concern about an overabundance of retail offices led to the creation of what is called the Plaza Retail Overlay Zone. And in that process, restrictions were imposed on ground floor office. Basically, a use permit requirement was established, along with special approval findings required concerning pedestrian character and vitality of the downtown in order to approve such uses. So we're using the door metaphor. That was a door that was closed. More recently, in 2012, the council ended up talking about and then establishing limitations on formula retail. Large-scale formula restaurants are prohibited in the Plaza Retail Overlay Zone. That's defined as a chain of 250 or more. And other types of formula businesses, chains of 10 or more, are subject to use permit review, including, again, special approval findings concerning the unique historic and visual character of the plaza. So that's another door that is closed. So these ordinances show that that local land use regulations can be effective in regulating the composition of downtown businesses, but it's also the case that these ordinances have, by design, narrowed the range of available options for downtown commercial property owners. Now, just shifting gears to talk about the wine industry and some of the trends that we see that are affecting the composition of uses on the plaza. Recently, we've seen that wine tasting businesses are filling spaces that have been traditionally filled with retail, while previously they tended to displace office uses or fill long vacant tenant spaces. We are seeing where in the past wine tasting facilities typically located in smaller tenant spaces and in interior areas such as Vinyl and Sonoma Court shops. Now we see them occupying larger tenant spaces and tenant spaces directly adjoining the plaza. Based on the outreach that was conducted for this study session, it's staff's understanding that wine tasting facilities are representing an increasing proportion of businesses looking for space on the plaza. Along with that, we're seeing interest from more wineries outside of Sonoma Valley to locate on or near the plaza. And in staff's view, this is significant because tasting rooms that represent wineries outside of Sonoma Valley simply aren't as connected to the community, and they don't support local agriculture and our local viticultural community in the same way that local wine tasting establishments do. And just as one more update in this regard, currently the city is aware of 3 tenant spaces in the process to be occupied by wine tasting businesses, this being in the plaza area. And there may be another 6 in the pipeline. But to an extent, this is a little bit speculative because, as we will discuss a little bit later on, right now wine tasting in the commercial area is not regulated by use permit. So frequently we know about them when they apply for a business license and not necessarily any earlier than that. Continuing on with wine trends, these slides illustrate how direct sales are increasingly important in terms of winery revenue. So in addition to the growing importance of direct sales, smaller wineries may not have tasting facilities. And in Sonoma County and elsewhere, estate-based wineries are facing increasing restrictions on tasting rooms. And for all of those reasons, storefront wine tasting in commercial locations has become increasingly attractive. Some of this discussion involves technicalities related to ABC license types, so we'd like to just review those very briefly. The 2 that we are mainly going to be referring to tonight are the Type 2 license and the Type 42 license. The Type 2 license is often referred to as a duplicate license. It refers to a winery, kind of the home base, which operates an off-site tasting room under their existing Type 2 license. Type 2 is what you need to operate a winery. And that duplicate license allows an off-site tasting location. In contrast, a Type 42 license is not affiliated with any specific winery. It allows for tastings from multiple wineries. It also encompasses a place that would sell beer, different types of beer, for example. So from the ABC's perspective, there's no differentiation between a wine bar and a tap room. They're encompassed by the same license. Right now, there are about 23 wine tasting businesses in the core of the plaza operating with Type 2 permits, and along with 3 wine bar tap rooms. And we wanted to also highlight another variant under the Type 2 license allowance. We've seen on the plaza tenant spaces occupied or shared with a couple of wineries operating with their Type 2 licenses. So in the case of the former Sonoma Enoteca, which is located where Pangloss is now, that housed, I think, 2 or 3 wineries operating with a Type 2 license that were basically sharing the space as a collective. So that brings us to existing city definitions and regulations. Tasting rooms have traditionally been regarded as a form of general retail sales, meaning that a use permit has not been required, and the city again may not become aware of a new facility until it applies for a business license. In the course of 2013-2014, the City Council reviewed the regulations concerning both tasting rooms and wine bars, and at that time the Council took some actions. New definitions were established in the Development Code for both wine tasting facilities and wine bar tap rooms. Operating standards were established applicable to both wine tasting facilities, including limits on food service, limits on hours, and limits on wine club events. Wine tasting facilities were, well, basically this was kind of a status quo direction, where it continued to be viewed as a permitted use in the commercial zoning district with requirement for use permit review in the mixed use zone, while wine bar tap rooms were identified as conditionally allowed use in the commercial zoning district, as well, meaning that they are required to obtain a use permit. We've been talking a lot about the Plaza Retail Overlay Zone. Let's look and see what that is. It's basically a subset of the downtown commercial district. It's the grayed out area shown on this current map. So again, this overlay zone, which was originally established in conjunction with regulations on offices, basically is the core area of the plaza and encompasses all of the parcels that directly adjoin the plaza, excluding the state parks. We're very fortunate that over the years the Chamber of Commerce has been providing business development and economic development work on behalf of the city. And as part of that effort, they've maintained a database of businesses located within the Plaza Retail Overlay Zone since 2012. We're going to look back at how things have changed, but let's start with where things stand today. This is the business composition of the Plaza Retail Overlay Zone really as of today. So right now the number of pure wine tasting facilities within the Plaza Retail Overlay Zone stands at about 23. That represents 17% of ground floor businesses within that zone and the third largest category of use. Right now, retail remains the largest category at 39%, while restaurants and food service businesses represent 19% of the inventory, or the second largest category of use. Total services comprise about 14% of spaces. That's down from 2012, as we will see. And only 4 of the ground floor spaces are occupied by what we define as formula businesses. Now, on this chart, you can see how things have changed from 2012. Retail did amount to 45%. It's down somewhat to 39%. Restaurant and food services are up from 15% to 19%. Wine tasting is up from 9% to 17%. Wine bar tap rooms have really held steady. They were 3% in 2012, they're 2% today. So I think we can see where the changes are, and we've talked about some of the trends associated with those different changes. This next slide shows things in a somewhat different way, mapping the change in plaza tasting rooms between 2012 and 2017. And we can see that in comparison to 2012, certain areas where there were clusters have kind of grown, such as in the Sonoma Court Compass Vine Alley area and along East Napa Street. We're also seeing an increasing number of tasting rooms along First Street West. At the same time, you can see that there are certain areas where things have held pretty steady. And in some cases, we've seen some transitions where, for example, the Sonoma Speakeasy, which is now a wine bar tap room, had started out as a tasting room back in 2012. In terms of how wine bar, actually, this slide, I apologize, the title is misleading. This is really about looking at tasting room revenues compared to other categories of use. It doesn't account for wine bars because that's a relatively small element. So this slide shows sales tax revenues that the city receives citywide, but it also shows below how wine tasting citywide stacks up and total revenues downtown stack up. So the city gets a 1% share of sales tax citywide. That amounted to $2.7 million. Citywide wine tasting revenue share was about $134,000, and that's in comparison to total revenues from businesses in the downtown amounting to about $773,000. And I hope I didn't say $1 million with respect to wine tasting, but I think I just did. $134,000 with respect to wine tasting, $773,000 for total sales tax revenues of downtown businesses. I hope I didn't botch that too badly. I think the city manager is going to step in and clean up.
No, I just wanted to say, you know, this has been, as we've been looking at working with our sales tax consultant to try to look at areas, et cetera, you know, we have data from 2012 to 2017, as you saw on the maps, where we can really see consistency. These numbers are broader than that, and how they have defined, this is the downtown is much broader than the plaza overlay. So it's always a little, I just want to be clear, some of these, when we're talking about geographic boundaries, are not all consistent. So if we say the plaza overlay, we're going to try to be consistent. When we're saying downtown, we're really talking much a broader downtown, down Broadway some as well. But this is a place, as we work with our sales tax consultant, that we want to, you know, if council wants more information, we think with more time we could become a little more precise.
All right. Moving on, as part of the lead up to this study session, staff also met, with representatives of local wine tasting businesses and the Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers. The purpose of that meeting was to talk about the upcoming study session, to hear and understand the perspectives of local wine tasting representatives. And we're very appreciative of the conversation that took place, and we've tried to extract some of the general themes and comments that we heard. So to just review those, they make the point that wine tasting businesses are, for the most part, locally owned and sell local products. The winemaking community is not an outside industry. It's inherent to Sonoma and Sonoma Valley and our history. The tasting room experience connects local residents and visitors to the agriculture of Sonoma Valley, and that helps support the preservation of agricultural lands and agricultural activities. They note that local residents constitute a significant proportion of wine tasting customers, and I think you'll hear more about that from the vintners and growers. They suggest that the city, rather than making things perhaps more difficult for a business category, should take steps to make it easier and less expensive for businesses of all types to open. And there was general agreement from those tenants on a couple of key points. First, the importance of maintaining business diversity in the downtown. And second, looking for ways to protect Sonoma-based wines and viticulture in Sonoma tasting rooms. As the city manager mentioned, the Chamber of Commerce has been tremendously helpful in developing much of this information, and Patricia Schultz, the executive director, is with us tonight to help out, and in particular to pitch in on what we've learned about how other communities address wine tasting businesses.
Thank you. Thanks, David, Mayor and Council. This slide that you see before you is some of the information that we gleaned from reaching out to these other communities. As you'll see, Healdsburg has 34 tasting rooms. They do have a use permit requirement, as do all the others. The policy that they just codified hadn't always been followed, but it was a 1 per block face limit. And they just, in the last few months, codified that and are moving forward. But what precipitated the conversation was concern of overconsumption of alcohol and the number of events that were happening at the tasting rooms. Calistoga has 12 tasting rooms. They, again, have a use permit requirement. They had considered following Yountville in requiring a retail diversity component, and Yountville has 25% non-wine-related retail as a requirement for their tasting rooms. But they decided not to go forward with that because it was difficult to enforce. Calistoga does have a local requirement for their tasting rooms, but it's a little convoluted. 75% of the wines poured for complimentary tastings in their tasting rooms must be Napa Valley AVAs. But as it's written, they tell us that it's very hard to enforce because people can waive the tasting fee, waive it with a purchase. So having that requirement written the way it is just very difficult to enforce. Yountville has 17 tasting rooms. Again, they have the retail diversity ordinance, 25% non-wine related retail in any tasting room. And they tell us that it hasn't necessarily increased their sales tax, but it has enhanced the image of retail diversity. They do have a locally produced requirement. And they also have newly established an annual conditional use permit review where they're actually going out and reviewing use permits for compliance around parking and seating and various requirements for that. Carmel has 13 tasting rooms, again, a conditional use permit required. They do have a local source preference as well, but they will tell you that while it's not legally enforceable solely on the geography, it factors heavily into the use permit decision, and they find that out-of-area wineries don't want to battle to be there. Now, conversely, they actively discourage mixed retail, and they were concerned that it would adversely impact the community character by having wine tasting in their retail downtown. So kind of a mixed bag, but hopefully that lends a little insight into what other communities are doing.
So maybe just a few other items I want to add to some of the comments that were made by David and Patricia. I think it's important to remember right now, like as staff and as an agency, unless someone pulls a building permit or if they when they go get the business license, we don't know what transactions and what's occurring. Frankly, sometimes until the door is open. And so it's been, that I think is a little difficult thing as an agency to really not be able to monitor and track that. I think another piece that David spoke about is as the economy is hot here, not only in our valley but in the Bay Area, we're seeing commercial rents go up. But some of the rents in early 2012 or something, 2010, were about $2.50 a square foot. We're being told right now that rents on the plaza are $6 a square foot for new tasting rooms, and some of those dollars. So that makes those dollars are fairly high for a typical retail, and I think that is an issue that is of concern as well. I've also been told anecdotally that some of the retailers that are traditional retailers are looking at maybe adding a tasting room to kind of modify and change up what they're doing. And the other piece I just want to say is, you know, I think overall the numbers we showed were 23 within kind of the plaza retail overlay, but overall kind of just outside of downtown and in downtown, overall there we have about 33 tasting rooms. So I think the other piece I just want to add is again, sometimes there are the world of kind of unintended consequences come as things evolve and change. And I think that's a little bit of where we are. I think we've got a lot of really good businesses in town. It was really good to meet with them and talk through and understand some of, you know, kind of how the industry has shifted. And that's, I think, part of the industry shifting, going directly to consumers at the same time with the economy really being hot, at the same time we have this amazing plaza where people want to come. So frankly, it's like a variety of good things that have come together that have then created these policy issues that we face as a community, and then looking at how that relates to, you know, our overall community and community character, and what do we want our economy and plaza to look like. So those are just a few other items I wanted to add. In terms of what the actions for council, and we'll go out to the public here, obviously, but one option is you think about this, and we do want to hear from each of you at the end of this study session. One option is you say, you know what, we're okay. Let's let the market work. Let's wait on this, and we don't want to do anything at this point. Or you may want some additional information. If you do want to look at some regulations, there are some pieces that we heard and some questions that you might want to comment on. Is, you know, use permit, local sourcing, retail component, any geography concentration policies. And then another option that council always has in these kind of situations is to determine if you want to do a moratorium. And as I've expressed to some business owners in tasting rooms, sometimes that moratorium word can be a little scary to the industry, and yet the purpose of a moratorium from a public policy perspective is kind of put a little bit of a pause. It's putting the pause button on so that as a council, as an agency, we can study something without it continuing to shift underneath us. That really is the purpose of a moratorium. And so you can take a time to understand and really figure out what we want to do, and then bring back additional regulations. So that would be the purpose of a moratorium if council individual members are interested in that. So with that, we're happy to answer questions from council. I'd like to go to Maureen Cunningham first to come up from Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers, asking her to speak on behalf of some of our tasting rooms, representing some of her members, and then we will come back to council questions.
Good evening, Council Mayor. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. Kathy, David, and Patricia, really appreciate all of your wonderful work in advance. Really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation and really a discussion around this topic. So thank you. We do have about 14 members of our organization here, so thank you for turning out. We have several board members from Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers Alliance, and also my colleague Abigail Taylor, our marketing and events coordinator, here to support. My name is Maureen Cottingham. I'm the executive director of Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers Alliance. Our mission of our organization is to market and promote the wines and grapes of Sonoma Valley, and to really reinforce the messaging that we do have and produce world-class wines here in Sonoma Valley. We are, our moniker for Sonoma Valley is that our roots run deep, and that refers to our heritage as the birthplace of California wine. As David said, the first winery was Buena Vista, established in 1857. What's really important here is that 85% of our wineries in Sonoma Valley are still family run, and in fact are being run by the 5th generation, which is really important. A little bit of detail around what David had mentioned, and also Kathy, is that there is definitely a shift in our sales model for many of our wineries. As Kathy mentioned, there is definitely a shift in direct-to-consumer. There's a constricted 3-tier distribution channel. We have fewer distributors. So 20 years ago, there were 3,000 distributors. Now there's 675, which forces an extreme competitive landscape. There's a vast majority of our wineries that can't get distribution, which, of course, then we turn to direct-to-consumer. And really, those dramatic changes in DTC sales was since 2005, when the United States Supreme Court ruling opened up DTC sales across the country. So there's 60% of our smaller wineries that solely rely on DTC, which obviously increases importance of consumer experience. Our direct-to-consumer, as stated by Silicon Valley Bank, State of the Wine Industry in 2006, will continue to grow as the largest channel for most of our wineries. A couple of key highlights we'd like to focus on, we took a survey of our tasting rooms that are around the plaza, just to find out from our conversation that we had several weeks back on several key things: how they interact with our locals, what sort of events they had, how many employees they had locally. So I'm going to share some of those highlights. We surveyed 14 tasting rooms on the plaza. 100% of those source grapes from Sonoma Valley AVAs. 43% of them are by appointment only. On wine pairings, 57% of these tasting rooms serve food prepared by outside vendors and businesses on the plaza. On events, 43% of them don't actually host events. 36% of them host wine club only events, and 30% of them host private only events. Interestingly enough, under wine club members, which we love this, on average, approximately 40% of our wine club, of our Vintners wine club members are actually local. On average, approximately 25% of our local wine club members visit weekly or bi-weekly. And on average, 70% of these local wine club members are regularly attending the events that are held by tasting rooms. So we love that. We love that our locals are enjoying the tasting rooms that we have on the plaza and almost weekly interacting with our vintners. 43% of our tasting rooms surveyed have more than, or have 100% of local employees, and 50% of our tasting rooms have at least 30% of tasting rooms surveyed have at least 50 local employees. And most importantly, our vintners, they truly care and are invested in supporting our community, and of course support locally, and are always contributing to different charitable organizations. On average, there's gifts anywhere between $2,000 to $25,000 a year from our vintners and growers. So I have some information if you'd like to know which charitable organizations they support. So in closing, the Sonoma Valley wine industry plays an increasingly important and large role in driving the local economy, which I think all of us know. And today, wine grapes and tasting rooms support a profitable agriculture, which sustains the agriculture heritage in Sonoma Valley. So thanks so much for your time today and for considering this conversation and discussion around tasting rooms.
Thank you. So are there any more presentations at this point?
Nope, so back to council questions.
Actually, before we get to council questions, we're going to take a very exact 3-minute break. And we're back. So at this time, Kathy, did you have any comments you want to make on this slide before we ask our questions? Or it's just there?
Nope, I don't think so. Thank you.
All right, so at this point, council can ask questions. Who has
I have one quick question.
a question?
I'm just curious why we didn't use St. Helena as a example.
Well, I'm going to just go ahead and say it's because we didn't think to, but we can definitely get that information.
All right, thank you.
Anybody? Anybody? Ms. Agramonte.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, I'm glad I took that break because I'm kind of annoyed. I studied this for days. We've had it. And there's things that aren't even in this that I've heard this evening, which sort of annoys me, because one job I need to have complete is to be able to have all materials in front of me, and I certainly didn't have it. So I'm kind of annoyed at this point. And I think I'd really like to hear some more of a breakdown of taxes paid. That seems to be something that's of great interest to me. I think this is a wonderful industry. I've met so many people from this industry, and I'm really proud to be from here, but I feel this is very slanted, so I'm not real happy with this. Thanks, that's it.
Okay. Do we have any questions at this time? Seeing none, I will take it out to the public for public comment. Just as a reminder, 3 minutes. If you like what someone's saying, you can get some jazz hands. If you don't, you can just stay quiet until you get to talk when it's your 3 minutes. And, I don't know, for all of you that were here back in 2014, the last time we talked about it, my sense is that we're coming at this from a much more collaborative angle. So I'd like to keep that in mind. And if you want to be mad at anybody, be mad at me. So with that, just a quick show of hands of who is going to be commenting. That's not too bad. So whoever gets to the podium first, and then we could have 1 or 2 people waiting by the door so that it keeps us moving, so that we can hear everybody tonight. Thank you.
I'm down here. Josette Broziker, 110 Loma Court. I have nothing against wine. In fact, I like wine and I belong to 4 wine clubs. But the tasting room phenomenon is another issue. It looks like other cities have come up with caps on numbers and densities allowed. So I'm sure that Sonoma can do the same thing. And that one day when tasting rooms come to the Springs, I hope the county can use what the city has done as a model. Some say let the free market take care of the issue. When they reach a saturation point, they will lose money and close. That does not seem to have happened. By implementing a cap and/or a moratorium on the total number and how many can be in a defined area, the city will be doing the right thing. Hopefully this will affect the market in such a way that building owners will not be comparing what they can get from a tasting room to what other businesses can pay in rent. In the end, the city will have a more balanced retail mix, yet tourists will still have tasting rooms to walk to. There are restrictions in numbers on other types of businesses, so I don't think it's really that controversial to do caps and density like some other cities have done. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council and Mayor Hundley. I'm Georgia Kelly at Mitchell Way in Sonoma. I saw a little bit of this on television when I went back, but I didn't get it all. So I may have some things that were talked about later that I didn't understand. The first thing I want to address is the let the market decide laissez-faire attitude, which I think has been proven to not work. Since between 2012 and 2017, I did get this statistic. It sounds like the number of wine, I'm not sure if they're bars or tasting rooms, and I want to get that clarified, but the number has almost doubled in 5 years. So letting the market decide means that we might in 5 years have twice the number we have now. So I would suggest to the council and to the community really to look at having some kind of restrictions, maybe not the right word, but oh, okay, I was reading this wrong. I think we need some type of directive of what would really be appropriate for especially the plaza area. If we have over 30 right now, what is it going to look like if we just leave it up to the market? I would like a clarification of what the difference is between a tasting room and a wine bar. I remember when tasting rooms meant that you got free samples, small little samples. And to me, that was a tasting room. But now they're selling the wine and they're calling it a tasting room. To me, that sounds like a wine bar. So I'd like to get some understanding of what the difference of those two categories are. And dealing with local agriculture, and I think it's great, we have a big agricultural community here and a lot of open land. But however, we do mostly have a monocrop. So I think that's also something to look at. We want to support local agriculture, but also more than just grapes. We should probably have other foods, and we may need them in the way things are going. And business diversity on the plaza, that's another thing I think is really important, that we have a variety of businesses. I know when I first came here, I think there were a lot of real estate companies on the plaza. People complained about that. Then there were vacant spaces on the plaza, and that was a problem. I don't know what can be done about the rents that are so high, only certain kind of businesses can afford them, but that's also a problem. And maybe that should be a community discussion, if it could be, I'm not sure. But it seems like the rates go up and eliminate so many kinds of businesses that could be on the plaza. So let me just see if there's anything I have in my 18 seconds. Well, the number of tasting rooms, I think, are so big on the plaza, and it does look like the town has become one that supports a lot of drinking, and I'm not sure that's the way we want to be viewed. It's not just a wine culture, but it's also what does the bigger culture look like?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Chris Petlock, 426 Napa Road, Sonoma. So my concern is that as other communities put caps and or limitations on what happens in their community, that it's going to put pressure here. And, you know, rather than capping or limiting or anything like that, maybe the community just considers, you know, grown and produced in Sonoma Valley AVA or something along those lines that, you know, just kind of keeps the focus here in our little valley. And maybe that'll naturally kind of keep the number down without putting an impromptu cap. The other thing that I'm concerned about, and I'm no teetotaler, but there is a lot more wanton drunkenness around town, and I just, you know, I'm concerned that, you know, that the ABC rules are not being enforced with serving people who've already had too much. And so I'm not sure if it's anything that our council or our community can be doing, but certainly just making sure as part of the business licensing process in there's some sort of requirement for the ABC's Safe Pour program or something along those lines, making sure that people that work in those businesses are well trained. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, David Eicher, 1110 Loma Court. In those 5 years since 2012, I'll list some of the businesses which have been taken over by tasting rooms now. Rin's Thai Restaurant is a beauty salon, musical instrument store. I don't know where the local high school band gets their instruments now. Teen clothing store, toy store, and others that have local serving. And yes, there are a lot of locals that you go to the tasting rooms, but we can't belong to 30 wine clubs and go to 30 tasting rooms. It's just way more than that we need as locals. And part of the reason why the rates have gone up more on the plaza than outside is because of the tasting rooms, which are vying for the space, so the supply and demand. So you have that. And what I understand is when you have a wine club from a tasting room and then they get shipped, that the city does not get that 1% sales tax on anything shipped because their facilities is outside of town where they ship it from. I've got a number of things in terms of ideas for possible restrictions you put around it. I won't get to that now. I do support a moratorium because it is just temporary to figure out exactly what you want to do. Learning that there's more coming. And I know looking at the map, there's at least 2 that have been missed. The Sonoma Cheese Factory has wine tasting. The Zena Hyde Canningham Winery is in the Legend Hotel, and they have wine tasting. So I'm not sure whether there's maybe missed as well. So there's even more than what the city knows about. And the main thing here, I'm going to talk probably more about this later, is a diversity. We need a diversity of the economic base within the city. If you're putting all of your eggs in one basket, and it's mainly tourism and winery. If we have a problem with the downturn economy or with global, I understand with the climate change, is the Sonoma Valley might not be able to support all of the wine growing that it does now. It's going to move to Oregon and further out. And so that could devastate the county and the city unless we are prepared for it. Preparing right now, you've got 10 teams looking at the bay to determine what to be done when the sea rises. So it's not enough just to look at trying to prevent the impact of climate change. We have to look forward to the far future and diversify. So again, I support moratorium, and so we can figure out what's the best going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Byron Hancock, 2410 Thornsbury Road. First, I want to thank you for all of your hard work on getting this to where you have, because I know it's a very, very big project. I was here in June when my husband lost a hair salon that he'd worked on really hard due to the rental increase of commercial rents, largely from a wine room who did subsequently take that space at an outrageous rent. So my interest is the diversity, as well as the suggestion that until you figure it out, but I'm not sure a moratorium can be done if the city manager says we don't really know if the wine room's coming until they get the business use permit. So I'm not sure how that moratorium would work, but I'd urge you to consider a requirement that the wine rooms do source their grapes local. A very large wine room's coming into town because they could not get into Healdsburg, and they're Lake County grapes. So if I have guests here and I'm going wine tasting, they really want to taste Sonoma County. That's why they're here. They want to go to Lake County, go up to Lake County, or wherever they're going to come from. But I think that's very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to be getting my exercise tonight. Thank you. Tom Conlon again. I want to say I agree with Councilmember Agramonte that the information in front of us tonight is not really what I had kind of hoped we would have for a fully informed study session. Frankly, I would like to see this conversation taking place in context of a full tourism area life cycle assessment. something that's looking at our whole tourism sector, the whole comprehensive visitor experience when they come to Sonoma. The reason people want to come here is because of the decisions that were made by your predecessors to not let this town turn into just every other town in the country. And many people in the community feel that we are on a tipping point right now. And so I believe a moratorium, as expressed by our wonderful city manager, is probably a prudent thing to do for us all to take a step back and to plan for the next 10, 15, 20 years of Sonoma's prosperity and resilience. So that would be my impassioned plea tonight, is to do that. And I agree, I'm not sure how that works if we don't have a use permit process in place. Maybe there's some creative thinking that can happen to make sure that we don't distort the market by creating the forecast of a moratorium a few weeks or months in advance. I think I agree with what Chris said about the pressure that will grow on Sonoma if other communities are starting to clamp down because they're trying to protect themselves. So again, it's an urgent matter. Healdsburg, 1 per block face is my understanding of their rules. I'm not real up to date on it. I know that would change current usage patterns on the plaza. Maybe that's a little bit too much in the short term, but maybe that could become a goal. Grape sourcing that's local, I can't see how anybody who believes in the authenticity of the visitor experience and supporting our local agriculture would be against making sure that we, you come to the plaza, you get to drink Sonoma wine. I recognize that there's general market conditions that have created difficulty for non-wine retail businesses. It's just tough right now for all kinds of regular retail. So maybe we have to look at some other flexibility. Maybe the service businesses in some of the space so it doesn't feel like a continuous wine bar experience. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much.
Robert Demler, 649 First Street West, Sonoma. MCL Mayor and council members, thank you for this study session tonight. Thank you for the chamber being here tonight, Pat and Maureen, the vintners and growers. I'm disappointed we didn't have the Sonoma Visitor Bureau here tonight. Also, before I say what I want to say, I want to congratulate you on your city planner. If he ever decides to retire, I think you should appoint him as city historian. Even if it's during my term, he should have it. And I'm not speaking as the city historian, I'm speaking for Robert Demler tonight. There are a couple of points that I want to make. I had a long sheet and I've rethought some things hearing some of the presentations tonight. We tout Sonoma as having good wine, good food, and good history. Well, the food is great. It's sometimes from pathetic to very creative and excellent. And the wines are good, and I do agree that they should be in the tasting rooms only from Sonoma Valley. As far as history, you can look at a historic building for just so long. So we have it. It's there. We need to save it. But it's backdrop for what we're discussing tonight. There are a couple of points of tension I want to make. The one is between the plaza and the use of the businesses on the plaza. The plaza is historic, of course. It's sacred to us Sonomans. The businesses in the plaza, they have grown sort of haphazardly. They suffer from a number of absentee, indifferent landlords, which negatively affects what goes on here. I don't think the city council can control that, but it is a big factor. The other is the tension between us locals and the visitors, the tourists to Sonoma, which many in our community depend on for livelihood. It's a fact of life. We have to live with it. I would like to see, I was very surprised at the percentages of participation by the locals. I belong to wine clubs as well. Belonging to a wine club is participation. Being able to go to a tasting room when often they close, I guess, but they're required to close at 6 or 7 on the
I'm
weekends.
going to give you about 10 more seconds.
And the plaza's too dark. We need to have them open longer. I would suggest quality of the wine tasting rooms and not the quantity, and that could be controlled by use permits. Plaza, much too dark,
Thank
too
you very
early.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Ms. Davis?
Hi, Mayor and City Council and City staff. Thank you all for your work on this study. I think it's a very important topic for our community to be addressing. I just want to say that I actually...
Could we have your name, please? And your
Oh, I'm
address?
sorry. Shauna Davis, 850 Donald Street. In my office at 1051 Broadway. And I am a fan of the taste rooms on the plaza. I think there's always room to evolve and improve in any sector, but we have been a long time agro-tourism community focusing on wine and food. And as a cheesemaker, I make my livelihood off of these wineries. I have a catering license. I work with the wineries. They hire us. We all pay our taxes. We employ. I was interested to find out today that the average tasting room staff pay is $22 an hour currently. And I think that's quite a great step up in a working wage. And I like to hear that taste rooms are battling over the cost of labor. I'll pay them $25, I'll pay them $30. I like hearing that those wages are going through our plaza. And I like seeing that these taste rooms on the square are primarily locally owned. The McLaren's, Passaggio, even the new wine bar Sai is locally owned by a single woman. These are businesses that are founded by people who live in this town and have homes in this town. And when I had my cafe on the plaza, I could gladly say that we paid a working wage and all of my staff did live within the city of Sonoma. And I think with the taster rooms, yes, we can evolve and monitor the alcohol consumption, timing, but I'm very hesitant to put a moratorium on the taste rooms themselves. And I really want to reiterate the amount of contributions that these wineries put back to our community, and not only through the Sonoma Valley Wine Auction, but just continuous donations. And having been a plaza merchant, the number of donation requests you get is unfathomable. I'm sure everyone would agree if you ask any winery tasting room on the plaza, the amount of donation requests that come through your door. And I see these taste rooms accommodating those requests continuously. So again, having had a restaurant on the plaza, a lot of our business was with the wineries as partners. So I want to be clear that that is how we make our livelihood. But myself and my 3 staff, and we own a home, and my husband all work in the hospitality, and I'm grateful for the vintners and growers and the tasting rooms, and I hope that we can come to a conclusion that is beneficial to both the vintners and growers, the tasting rooms, and our community at large. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Councilman, thank you guys for that presentation. It was pretty fascinating. My name is Morgan Twain Peterson. I'm the founder and winemaker of Bedrock Wine Company. Thank you, Shauna, for that. Shauna was my first cooking instructor when I was 5 years old here in Sonoma. So I was born and raised in Sonoma. I left to go back east to college. I studied history. I have a master's in American Studies, and then I came back and I founded Bedrock in 2007 to focus predominantly on my family's vineyard, which is located up in Glen Ellen and features some of the oldest vines grown in the state of California, originally planted by General Joseph Hooker and General William Tecumseh Sherman. And our vines date to 1888, and they're planted by Senator George Hearst. We recently entered into a lease for the Hooker House, which I thought was pretty amazing as a student of history. One, I was a little bit heartbroken that the Preservationist Society had to give it up, but it seemed like they were only able to keep it open a couple hours once a week. And so when we signed the lease with the intent of beginning the process for a tasting room, our first call was to the Preservation Society. So we're actually going to work with them to continue to keep Hooker House open and curated, but we will also hopefully we'll also be serving wine as well, and wine based from Hooker's own vineyard. So I think, you know, I would hope that there's two things. One is we've obviously entered into this lease. We're in the process of getting permits, and now we're facing a potential moratorium that we didn't know about when we signed a very expensive lease. So if a moratorium goes into effect, I would hope that you guys would take into account some of us that have actually already signed into a lease, and for a 5-year lease at Hooker House, we're looking at several $100,000s that we need to, you know, look at from the business side. And then on top of that, I would hope you see that, you know, this is a, you know, I'm a local kid, and also, you know, I'm a history buff, and I think that this is one of those areas where we can really tell the story of Sonoma and its history more effectively, and hopefully also strengthen some of the nonprofits and some of the historic stuff that goes on that is so important to making Sonoma not just, you know, another American town from the, you know, that's filled with strip malls. So anyways, just wanted to throw those two bits out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing? Paul Justo, 180 Sierra Place, and operate tasting room on the Sonoma Plaza, 498 First Street East. And it seems we've all been inspired by Shauna here, which is not uncommon. A couple points I'd like to make, and thank you, sorry, Mayor and Council. First of all, proud member of the Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers. Thank you, Maureen, for advocating for us. Secondly, 4 or 5 year board member of the Sonoma Valley Visitors Bureau currently, along with my board colleague, Leslie John, who's right behind me as well. So we are represented here tonight. I think Johnny had something going on. At the base of what I'd like to say for the record is that as an operator of a local business here in town that employs 100% Sonoma Valley residents and produces predominantly, almost exclusively, Sonoma Valley wines with some Sonoma County wines mixed in there, is the amount of pride and that us having our home on the Sonoma Plaza gives us as a foundation for our business, number one. So there's the commerce side of things, but two, the reason for our existence, and that's kind of in line with what Morgan was saying as well. We live it, we breathe it, and it is who we are. It's the guideline for why we exist, and we take it very seriously. There are many days when I look at the sales numbers and I say, well, you know, sales weren't there, but hopefully we made a lot of people happy. And we consider ourselves ambassadors for Sonoma Valley, in addition to trying to sign them up for our wine clubs and send them home with a case of wine. So I think in total, the experience that we're delivering is more than just pouring people lots of tastes and trying to get our hands in their pockets. It's an experience that is over 150 years long, and one that we take very seriously, and I know a lot of people in the room do as well. So thank you for allowing me to comment, and we appreciate your efforts here, and very much so collaborative in all ways. If there's anything that we need to be doing, we need to know about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leslie John, 824 2nd Street West, Sonoma, and Pangloss Cellars at 35 East Napa Street. A huge thank you to the council and to all of the work that's been put into preparing for the discussion this evening. I think there's more data that needs to be shown, but I think what has been done so far is a huge step in the right direction. I think one word is collaboration, that it's responsible for us all to look at this issue and follow the right steps to have an informed process to get to a result. It's good business practices for all of us as stakeholders in this community. I think the key word is also balance. Everyone who is in the tourism industry, as well as a resident of Sonoma, values and recognizes balance or imbalance. And if a moratorium moratorium were to be enacted or regulations, other pressure points in this community right now are not going to go away. Traffic, buses, affordable housing, those are not to be piggybacked on tasting rooms and tourism. They're a part of what we have done over the past 25 years in marketing this destination, and not necessarily just marketing, but by word of mouth, people learning about it. So I think all of us in the tourism industry would welcome the opportunity to be a part of the solutions as it relates to all of the buses in the recent last year or so that's become a big issue. Affordable housing, 73% of my staff lives in this area in 95476, and we don't have any part-time people that work for us because it is so challenging for us to find staffing that we offer them full-time work so that we can ensure or make our best bet at keeping them. I also agree with Paul Justo that we made a really big bet when we moved in to renovate the plaza location at Pangloss Cellars, and we made a really big bet that also on our tagline, which is a celebration of Sonoma. And we have done everything we can to try and create an experience that's both enjoyable for our locals as well as our tourists. When I look at our business, 15% of our membership lives in 95476. 35% of our membership lives within 90 minutes. So when those people that live within 90 minutes come here for a membership event or just to taste or to enjoy our tasting room, they're going to have lunch somewhere. They're going to get gas somewhere. They're staying in some hotel.
I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds.
Okay, thank you. If a question that I would have is, if a moratorium is enacted, what does happen to those who have signed leases, who are in the process right now? I would definitely not be.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor and council, good evening, everybody. My name's Scott Stone. I'm a resident of Napa, and I work here in Sonoma. So what I wanted to talk about tonight is really to point out what I think you guys have is just a less of a concern, but a huge opportunity here. You're at the forefront of these huge changes here in Sonoma Valley, particular in Sonoma County in general. But with all these changes going on, I just think it's an opportunity to further differentiate Sonoma Valley from all the other areas. There's a sort of an inherent competition between Napa and Sonoma. We all know about it. And I'm not saying that you should compete with Napa, but it's a great time to, again, differentiate yourself. And really circle back to the local ways, the family values, the uniqueness that Sonoma Valley has. I work at Shug Winery here in Sonoma Valley. We've been here about 25 years. And it's the classic family winery. And I think if you can keep the tenants on the plaza coming in from those types of wineries, it'll keep Sonoma Valley intact. Our winemaker's been with us for 25 years. Our cellar master's been with us for 20 years. That's the kind of business that Sonoma Valley represents. And to take those types of businesses again into Sonoma Plaza that represent the entire valley would be a positive and an advantage for Sonoma Valley. A couple people brought up some concerns about public drunkenness due to all these new tasting rooms spilling out onto the plaza, but I think what can be done about that is through this process, if you guys really reach out to the wineries, we can become your partners. There's a ton of programs out there that the ABC sponsors and other entities. They do the LEED programs. There's the responsible beverage service. And to require wineries to put all their staff through that would be a great step to increase the responsibility level. And I think you would find a decrease in intoxication on the plaza at the end of the night. So I think Sonoma Valley is a world-class winemaking area, and change is right in front of us. And I think we should
I'll give you
embrace
about 10
it.
seconds.
Embrace it instead of fight it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, any further public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the council for discussion. Mr. Cook.
Well, I'll go ahead and start off. First of all, I'm not a member of Sonoma Vintners and Growers. I am a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm a grape grower. But I also was elected by the city of Sonoma as an elected official to deal with all issues. Tonight is a study session, and I do appreciate everyone coming up and speaking. As you know, this came in 2012. I was on the council. I voted no. I strongly have always felt that business can regulate itself. When the government gets involved, you have an issue. Since then, we've had a change in the city manager. We've had some things that now we're enforcing the laws that we pass. One of my biggest concerns back in 2012 when I was elected was that the council was passing all this stuff and disrupting business and disrupting everything, but nothing was being enforced. So the bad actors were able to do whatever they want. I believe in farm to table. I believe that most of the wineries that are in Sonoma and Sonoma Valley sell Sonoma grapes. But I can tell you I'm a grape grower, and they go from Napa to Sonoma back in different percentages. It depends on what the varieties are. So I am concerned when we start going beyond the study session and we start talking about possible ordinances. But in the end, one thing that's different now than it was in 2012 is I want to protect what Sonoma is. I've always been one of those that matrix voting scares me. For most of you, you haven't been to some council meetings. Matrix voting is something that you start talking about an issue, and the majority of the council kind of keeps going on. And in the end, you don't really get, every council member doesn't get what they've started out with. It's different pieces of the puzzle. And that always concerns me because with the smoking ordinance, I was against smoking in the plaza. But now with our smoking regulation, most people don't know it, but you can't smoke in the city of Sonoma unless you're smoking pretty much in your house and in your car. But we don't enforce it. I've seen people smoke. But saving city staff and saving us on the council, we are moving into that direction of enforcing. So when people compare what happened in 2012 to what's happening today, I always just want to do a history lesson because I think it's very important to understand. Because I do want to see a moratorium go in place. And the reason I want a moratorium go in place is so we can figure this out. It's just a process that we have to do. I would hate to wake up tomorrow and see the Sonoma Index Tribune saying that we put a moratorium on wine tasting rooms like it was forever, because it's not. I'm hoping it would be 6 to 8 months at the most to figure out how we can try to regulate a little bit of what's going on in Sonoma, but not get that overpowering that sometimes happens. And it scares me because I've seen sometimes when we start going down this road, things kind of in matrix voting start going a little bit awry. So I guess the study session, I want to tell city staff that I would like to look into the use permit to see exactly, what we can do. Local sourcing, I think it can be part of the discussion. I know that a lot of proclamations, when I was the mayor of Sonoma, we said a lot of things, proclamations that were just kind of for the betterment of our community. And I understand Calistoga and other areas in Carmel, when you get things that are unenforceable, I think it's a concern. So I think the language would have to be very careful, because I would not like to see, a company that is like Buena Vista, who is outside our jurisdiction, so I'll use them as they own Deloche and they own Raymond and many other wineries. So I would hate to see limiting the experience of people coming to Sonoma to taste different wines, because the industry here in Sonoma Valley, we have what we call the top 7. We're trying to integrate into different varieties, and but I don't want over-regulation. So I'm very concerned about over-regulation. The geographic area of it, I'm very concerned, but I would like to know a little bit more information of, I think we're totally different than Healdsburg, because I think that we're one square, and if we're worried about concentration of wine tasting rooms, I don't think that would be an issue here, but I would like to have city staff, look at it. Retail component, I remember when the formula store ordinance, I was on the ad hoc committee a long time ago for that, and there was a lot of different discussions on, having a certain percentage of retail versus the wine tasting. That scares me also, because I think sometimes when you make people comply to a certain restriction, you could lose your farm to table, and all you have is the big corporate that can be able to do that, because I think retail is dead. If I asked everybody who's bought something from Amazon in the last year, I'd probably get everybody's hands up. So we do know that the retail component is a big issue. And I think that the other thing is, I just want to let my colleagues on the council know that we have to be very careful, because I remember in 2008, and I remember being on the Chamber of Commerce. When I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce, we were scared when the numbers were coming back, looking at vacancies that were happening on the plaza. And people say, well, that can't happen again. It can happen again. One earthquake and we're back, or 37 goes underwater, which probably will at some point. But I guess what I'm saying is we have a beautiful industry here in Sonoma, and we got to protect it. So as a council member, I'm all for protecting, but I do not want to over-regulate. And I want to make sure that the reason I'm saying I want a moratorium is just to push the pause button and try to figure out how we can protect one of our biggest assets, and that's our wine industry.
Ms. Arrington.
Okay. Thank you to everyone for their presentations tonight, and also the people who made public comments. Very thoughtful and helpful. I guess my first thought is that one benefit that hasn't been discussed is that in many other places there's increasing commercial activity in rural and agricultural areas, and to the extent that people come to an urban area to do wine tasting, it's actually much better environmentally that everyone comes to one location, parks, and then walks around. So I actually think that is a benefit. And as we see areas where people try to develop wineries in remote locations like on Sonoma Mountain or up on Cavedale, that is less desirable overall for us than having people come in town, us as a general population. It's undesirable to have people going up rural roads to more exotic locations. It's probably better to have them all in town. I think that in terms of the town of Sonoma, one of our priorities should be promoting and protecting our local business owners first. And so I would like to see some kind of priority for Sonoma wineries and Sonoma businesses over everyone else. I think that in terms of sort of like high-end tourism, coming to the town of Sonoma and getting to experience all kinds of Sonoma wines and being part of our culture is valuable. And so I'd like to figure out how can we promote that and also prioritize that in whatever we do. I definitely think we should have a use permit. Right now, we don't really have a way of knowing what is going in and tracking it and kind of figuring that out. So I think that's probably something we should have been doing, but it's a good thing to start now. And then in terms of the number, I guess one question I have is I don't really understand why the people who currently have wine tasting rooms want more competition. I actually don't understand that, and so perhaps somebody can explain that to me. If I had a wine tasting room and there was already 34 other ones, I would be happy for there to be a moratorium, but it's not my business, so I don't know. But I would agree with Councilmember Cook that probably we need a short moratorium to figure out some of these aspects, with the goal being promoting Sonoma wines, making sure that we keep a focus on the great products of our county, our valley. And then there was a question about what would happen if we had a moratorium to people who were currently in the process, had entered into a lease or had approved a space. And I spoke to the city manager about that today. And I think in general, people who have already made financial commitments would probably be, hopefully, allowed to proceed. And it would be people who had not embarked on any financial commitments to a tasting room that wouldn't be permitted to start during that process. But the city manager could address that. I mean,
I think it's a fair question, because there were two questions we heard from current tasting rooms. One, for current tasting rooms, how would the moratorium affect them? And obviously it does not affect their current lease or anything like that if they're currently in places. Now, if we would decide to change other things like issues with food or hours or those types of things, those would impact any current folks that are already present in our community. So the city attorney may be able to be a little more precise, but when we put a moratorium in effect, it's always a question of kind of where the hook is and when is someone vested. I think we may need a little bit of latitude here to be looking at individual circumstances. Should we bring back a moratorium? And Veronica, if you want to maybe elaborate a little more.
Sure. So there's a couple of ways to look at moratorium and what I'll call a trigger date, applicability. And the questions can range from what do you tag them to, in business, already in business, legally vested, which is a point in time that someone makes substantial expenditures in reliance upon a permit or entitlement issued by the city. But you can choose on that spectrum to make that point whatever it is that the council believes is fair and just and supported by reason. I mean, you can't be arbitrary and capricious about it, but you certainly can say, well, we're looking at people who haven't made commitments to leases. That was one of the things that you mentioned. Certainly you can do that. You can look at people who haven't yet pulled a business license. That can be one of the things that you use as the trigger. You can use a number of triggers. What we generally try to look at is something that is that you can substantiate by fact. So, and by fact that isn't easily manipulable, if you will. So, but we can bring forward, if the council determines that it wants to go forward with some type of a moratorium for whatever period in time, we can bring forward some options. These are the things that you could tie it to as to applicability. Here are the pros and cons of those items as we see it. As a staff, and let the council sort of look at those and make a recommendation. The one thing that you would not be able to affect, however, is anyone who has a legally vested right to proceed. Generally speaking, a mere lease isn't going to necessarily constitute that, but you can still pick that as a point in time if the council so chooses.
Thanks, that was helpful. So I wouldn't support kind of catching people that are on the way to developing their businesses already, and then there's a moratorium, and so they've invested funds, but now they can't proceed. So that would have to be, for me, that would be part of figuring out a moratorium. And then in terms of working together, since people are here, I think it would be really helpful just on the tourism community rub if there could be additional education, and I mean, people are gonna laugh, but I mean for real, about how to cross the street. Like if people leaving tasting rooms could be educated. No, that's like one of the biggest things, that people don't know how to cross the street when they visit here, and they're constantly walking out in traffic, and we're gonna have to figure out how to deal with that. So I think that if people go to tastings rooms and there's more education about crossing together and waiting your turn and all that, that would actually be helpful. So those are my thoughts.
Mr. Edwards.
So this is going to be scattered around a little bit, but people haven't been able to cross the street in Sonoma since before there were tasting rooms. So I guarantee you that. So I just want to touch on a couple of things. Number one, I don't have interest in a moratorium. I think I love the free market. I love the Constitution of the United States and people's rights to do what they want with their properties and what have you. I do feel that a moratorium would raise the rents on the people who have short-term contracts, because if you limit the number, then the people that are most successful are the landlords will come in and ask for more rent, which I know they will, because I know some of them. And I just think it's a rough road. One of the best things I learned tonight was the average rate of $22 an hour that's being paid. We have people coming in here and talking to us saying, we want $15 an hour, and wow, we're $7 ahead of that right now. And I think it's great, the percentage of people that are actually working here. But nobody brought up the fact that there's a lot of executives in the wine industry that are local people. I know lots of folks that are making $100,000 salaries. And what this machine has generated is a lot of revenue. And then those people that are making $100,000 are going out and they're hiring other people, doing other things, using goods and services in this town. Back in the 1800s, talking about history lessons, Bob Kennard Sr. Told me that, and I wish his son was here because he could probably correct me, at one time there were 24 bars on the plaza and a couple of brothels. Then Broadway was mostly boarding houses. A lot of those big Victorians were boarding houses, and we had a completely different town. But and you go back to the Gold Rush days, there wasn't, just one store selling shovels. There were hundreds of stores selling shovels. There were people selling food. They were selling equipment, horses, you name it, for that particular gold rush. Diversity in crops. This used to be a stone fruit area. But stone fruit just doesn't pay. Stone fruit doesn't ship well. As well, if you look at with the San Giacomos, I know that there was a lot of stone fruit in their history, and there's some historical filming going on in town that'll bring some of those stories back, and I think we'll be all better educated on that down the road. But when you talk about the type of businesses we have here, the number one crop in Sonoma is actually money. There's more money here than I think we all know about. And I know there's an investment guy sitting in the room, but there's probably 100 guys in town providing investment advice. Should we have a moratorium on those guys? No offense to lawyers, but there might be 150 lawyers in town, would be my guess. And, do we have enough lawyers? I don't know. But we all seem to have those needs, and we have people that are doing compliance work in the legal field. We have all kinds of interactions. There's a lot of businesses that depend on this. My business doesn't necessarily depend on it, but my business is enhanced by it, because I work actually mostly in Napa providing products to the tasting rooms. Let's see, where else? So somebody brought up toy stores earlier. The Wall Street Journal just announced online today that Toys R Us is going bankrupt. 1,700 locations in the United States. And David, you had mentioned people buy from Amazon. I mean, the trucks run 7 days a week until about 10 o'clock at night here, delivering Amazon. And I have no idea how much tax revenue we get from that, but I believe we should. I'm disappointed that we didn't do the study on St. Helena. St. Helena, from my understanding from the banking community, has several empty buildings right now because there is a moratorium on wine tasting. But the average rental rate is $6 a square foot in St. Helena. And I think that's a very good, a better comparison to us based on the amount of traffic that runs through St. Helena. And so people aren't able to fill those buildings. And if anybody in the room can tell me what business you can put in at $6 a square foot and actually make a living, feed your children, send them to school, I'm wide open. I would go for the moratorium if you could tell me what that business is. But my hunch is that we have a lot of pressure on cannabis in this town. And when I talk to my friends that have warehousing businesses and things in Santa Rosa, for example, I have one in particular that has been paying 36 cents a foot for just a warehouse. So he's being booted from that, and the new rate is $2.50 a square foot, and it's going to a cannabis operation. So we have that pressure on the community as well. And the last thing that I would want to see are cannabis tasting rooms around the plaza, because they're going to be the ones who are going to be able to fill the space and where the dollars are. So I know I'm rambling on a little bit. But Shauna, I appreciate your comments. I know your business depends on this group, and I just think it's, and I'm not even going to go to what the community does, the wine community does for this valley. But one thing I will say is I went to dinner the other night with a winemaker who employs 450 people in Sonoma Valley, and just about all of them come from Sonoma Valley. And we went to Mama Tonino's and we drank Italian wine because, you know, people like that. Michael Ghilarducci, his vineyard was up in Lake County. Is that right, Shauna? And he was producing his own wine, and that's the house wine at the Depot Hotel. And that's what I always order there because I like it. It's when you go to Nugget Markets, Whole Foods, and those folks, they consider local a 200-mile radius. That includes the Central Valley. It includes everybody here. So I have a real problem with saying that, and who's going to enforce it? We were talking about enforcement the other day, and I pulled up outside the Basque, pointing my van towards the fountain, and we were talking about cannabis that night, and there's just this big cloud of smoke, and everybody's like this. I mean, it's just amazing how we're going to have a moratorium, put more rules on these folks, and who in the hell is going to enforce it? No one. So those are my points.
Ms. Agramonte.
Thank you. So, firstly, thank you all for your comments this evening. And you are absolutely right. Your philanthropy is second to none. In fact, when I first moved here, my background is in fundraising, and I thought, you know what they all need? They need someone to say no when somebody asks them for donations. And that's the company I wanted to start. But then I started getting to know some of the vineyard people and winery people, and it was like, they're friends. These are all friends of ours. I'm not going to say no, especially from a stranger. So, okay, I stopped that business. I stopped thinking about that business. So here's the question I have, and I think Dwayne brought this up about being in the queue. I don't know who's in the queue, if anyone is. Matt Stone talked about ABC classes. I know I brought the literature from ABC to the city of Sonoma, and it somehow got, well, I'm trying to remember, handed off to Bob Smith to walk around the plaza to share with others. I don't know, but I know the class was not well attended from here in Sonoma Valley. I want to thank David Cook for talking to me about varietals. I had no idea what that meant. You know, I just thought maybe shoes. I don't know what that was, but now I know. Sometimes you want to enhance your wine with some different varieties, so thank you, David Cook. Let's see, and then I still don't understand the tax breakdowns when with a wine club that possibly could be in Sonoma County and not with us. How do we benefit from those taxes? And I still have to say to staff, where did you get that information? Because it wasn't in my packet. And when I make a decision, I need everything because I want to do the best job I can for everyone. I want to be fair. So there were things here this evening I'd never seen, and I'm telling you, you can look throughout my whole packet here that we have on our laptop, and I have things highlighted, checked, little notes written. So recently, we were here with a discussion with respect to the Visitors Bureau about the things that are going wrong here in Sonoma. And the things that were brought up, I can't attribute this to one speaker, but I know about the traffic and people that don't know how to cross the street, some other things that are a problem, but guess what? It's not your responsibility. It's our responsibility, the city's responsibility, to make sure that we control our traffic, that we do look for more parking for our visitors. It's not on your back. This isn't your responsibility. So I, like others, I don't know how I feel about the moratorium. You know what? I don't want to get into the slash and burn business. I want to be fair and balanced, and I think Matt Stone was the one that said, or someone said, I'm sorry, I'm not attributing it to the right person, but we're looking for something fair and balanced, and that's where I am now. So I just, wanted to remind people that things that happen here are really our responsibility, and we have to face that. Thanks.
Okay. I know it's been a long night. I will try to keep my comments short. I think the economy is a very complex thing that we have very rarely talked about from up here, at least in any kind of depth. And I think that something like figuring out how a downtown economy works and how all the pieces fit together of what stores that you have and what is the effect on the rent and what is going to keep people going and what's the thing that's going to make people stop going. I think it's very complex. And unfortunately for this exercise, I don't think we're going to get to the level of economic modeling that I would prefer. But I do know that next year, as a part of our general plan update, we are doing a more comprehensive economic study where we can actually look at all these little pieces in different industries and also look at opportunities where we could maybe diversify. And then I imagine and I hope that as a part of that, as we look again as the plaza as a district and how things work together, like a lot of cities have downtown districts that have like lots of research about composition and things that you can do to help everybody stay successful. But for this exercise, to jump to the end, I support exploring all of the options that we were given: a use permit, source limitations, non-wine retail component, geography, concentration, and I think a moratorium is important because the whole point is to stop a rush from coming in the door. If everyone wants to save their place there, maybe we can craft it in a way that's not going to people that are at certain phases of their projects, but I think it's important to give us time to adequately think this out because I think it's a complex problem and the answer is also complex. And my other thoughts about just businesses generally, like a lot of times people talk about these old retail stores in Sonoma and they love them so much and they've been here forever, but it's so hard for any new opportunities for stores, and I don't agree that retail is dead. I think that while the local economy is going to shift in composition, I think there will always be people that are ready to meet the needs and desires of the people that live here, and I think that the people who live here especially appreciate things that come locally. So I think that there are businesses out there that would love opportunities to actually have a physical presence in the city, and I think there's things that we could do to make it easier. And I think the other side of that is acknowledging the growing wine industry all around the world and all these places that are starting to get in competition with us. And if we want to remain a very well-known, renowned wine place, then I think that we could use our policies to, focus on what we have and not just the fact that we are an attractive place for other businesses to advertise their wine that's not made here. I think that's where I'll wind out. My last thing was that it's a careful balance of maintaining and possibly increasing diversity while keeping our economic drivers and existing businesses healthy. I acknowledge that if regulations are too aggressive, then we will suffocate the industries and then they will either leave us or fizzle out. So in discussing all of these things, even though I want to talk about all of them, I acknowledge that it is a very careful thing, and I just want to know what all of our options are before we pick our final result. Any more comments from my council? Has our staff gotten helpful things from us?
No, appreciate the comments of council and the community that was here to participate tonight. So we'll be taking this and pulling it back together and then returning to council.
Thank you. Well, so I think we only have a couple things left. Council member reports and comments. Anybody?
Earlier, you know, this evening, Madam Mayor, you gave a proclamation to declaring Falls Prevention Awareness Week. And so what I wanted to let people know is this weekend, I have a dog that's really not a great walking dog. And he threw me, as he was trying to go after another dog, into the brick wall at Sebastiani's. I caught myself, nothing happened, but I have been in the hospital before with him taking me down. So two things, he's going to go back to the trainer. And the other thing is, I think that evening, I think I got a message from God, because I read an obituary from San Francisco where a woman was killed from a head injury walking her dogs. So this is really a serious issue, and I really appreciate the woman that was here to tell us about it, because I think some of the things that affect people as we get older is balance and possibly taking on the wrong breed of dog. But I just think that's really important, and I'm glad that she discussed the classes. And I think I will ask for the board from the Women's Club to see if we can't have a speaker regarding that. Thank you.
Thank you. One note I would like to say is that last week a package of bills passed through the state legislature related to affordable housing, including certain things on the procedural side, certain things on the money side, which actually would bring money to Sonoma. And it was very exciting. I was in the Capitol at 10 o'clock at night when it passed. And assuming the governor will sign it, which I think he did because he tweeted favorably about it, it's going to be one piece to help us. Ms. City Manager.
So just a few brief things here. Got a few slides to make it easy. We got an email today from Sonoma Clean Power, and I know that Councilmember Harrington is on that board for us. And they actually are looking for 7 to 11 volunteers to be on the Community Advisory Committee. So this has been part of our climate action and part of how we are environmentally doing a lot of good work in partnership with other agencies in the county. So you just go to Sonoma Clean Power, and this group will be looking at their programs and budgets and rates, so that it's like they get into quite a bit of meat and information. So also Planning Commission, council gave direction on the new appointment process. 5 positions are going to be appointed by individual council members, and the council as a whole will be voting on 2 at-large and 1 alternate. And so we will be putting up applications for individuals to apply, and we'll put in an email out probably sometime within the next week that will be going online. And just want to remind folks that anyone who's interested in serving our Planning Commission, we would welcome your application, and any current members that are interested and want to continue to serve to reapply. We do have a new online application tool as part of our Civic Web portal that we'll also be unveiling and using. So just wanted to make sure the folks are aware, and we'll make sure that we get something out to the IT and the newspapers when that hits as well. And just a few updates, and we've got a lot of construction happening in town. So the West Napa Street Water Project hit a milestone, and they connected with Sonoma Market to the new water system. And there's a lot of work, and a lot of times when we drive by, it's late, you can't quite see what's occurring, and these pictures give a sense of what's going on in those trenches, but really making sure that everything is connected and working safely out there. So we're making progress, and I think what I'll ask at a future meeting is to kind of get a little more specific timeline of how things are going along out there. And then we've also been working on our street rehabilitation and water service project. This is out in Avenel do Oro. And so we're working on replacing the water service mains now, and then we'll be doing that overlay.
How long are the planning commission applications being accepted?
We're just looking at the timing. It'll be at least 2 weeks. Hope to maybe have it to be about 3 weeks. So we're just putting together timing, and so we'll make sure we get the word out.
And I trust, as tradition, we're going to buy an ad in the Index Tribune and make sure that everybody gets to see this, the people who don't use.
Yeah, so we'll be doing social media and web, but we will also be doing some broader piece as well.
Thank you.
All right, and before we adjourn, I will remind everyone that today's meeting is dedicated to Renters Week, which is next week, or which is this week, and that there's a rally on the plaza at 5:30 on Friday. Thank you all very much.